Hello and welcome to episode 179 of the Imperial Truth. I'm Greg. Joining me as usual is Mr. Howard. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you, Greg. How are you doing? It's in this coming into the end of the lovely month that is February.
Indeed. Yeah, not too bad. Can't grumble. Plodding away.
Good.
Yeah, it's pretty much, yeah. It's a relentless trudge of getting stuff done. But before we
Wow.
get into any of that, yeah, it feels a bit like that. Element Games. Go and buy all your plastic toys at Element Games. Go and buy your paints. Go and buy your movement trays for the old world. Go and buy all kinds of other manner of things because it's all awesome. And use the link on the show notes to help support the show. And that's about it, really.
There is a whole bunch of exciting heresy flavored stuff coming in the form of our friends, the Solar Auxilia.
Indeed. That looks like it's going to be plenty coming for that.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. So that I would imagine is going to tempt a few people to dive in and have a look at stores such as our friends at Element.
Indeedly doodly. So, moving on, you been up to much, heresy-wise?
I have. Assuming this goes out at a particular time, I have been working on our Solar Auxilia.
Indeed, it will. Cool. Yes,
That's been my hobby focus. I've been really quite excited about them. I mean, and largely inspired because I wasn't before. Largely inspired by Legions Imperialis. I got to because I was doing some for them. I kind of got into reading up on them and getting a better understanding of what they are and what they look like and what other people have done with them in the past. And I was like, actually, these are really cool. These are really quite fun kits, a really quite kind of fun faction. And you start planning out a little allied force, and then you start thinking, well, where would I go with it from there? What can I do with these? And the infantry in particular. I mean, the tanks I've done Imperial Guard tanks in the past. These are very cool examples of tanks, but it was the infantry I was most interested in working up. And it is quite the kit. it's very contemporary Games Workshop kit where there's a lot of detail packed into a plastic frame, a lot of components to work with. You can do a lot with these. And I feel like it's just a start with their principle of upgrade kits and things. I've really enjoyed them.
So the infantry, so the arms are different. How much can you play around with the infantry?
You can. It's similar in the philosophy, I think, to the recent Marine infantry in that you have certain set poses. I would say there's more flexibility than there is in the Marine because the torso is separate to the legs.
Legs, yeah.
So it means you've got the ability to twist the waist, which can quite dramatically change the pose, actually. You've got separate arms. The hands are molded onto the weapons, and typically the weapon is molded into one of the arms because these are rifles with stocks. So that kind of sets that rather than these being things that you just drop in. But there's quite a lot of variability there. It's in the extras. There's some just quite nice developments. Unlike you get so used to building Marine infantry, just having the fact that the pouches that you put on the belt or put around the waist have a little notch in them so that they sit over like a little rail that is going around the waist of these things, and it just sort of drops into place really neatly rather than trying to fit it randomly on a curved surface or try and sort of wedge it onto the belt of a Marine or something. It's it went together. It felt really neat and really well considered as a kit, I thought.
Awesome.
The way it went together. Particularly like the bayonets, which are blade thin. They are incredibly they are like needles. They're not a wide blade or something like that. They are a very it's got that real Napoleonic feel of it being a needle like thing, and you can have them fitted to the underside of the rifle or hanging off an appropriate lug on the belt, which looks particularly cool. Yeah, I like them. I like them a lot. Cool. I think it's a cool kit.
Yeah, we sent Howard all that bits because I wasn't going to get them done in time. So Howard looks like he's collecting a Solar Auxiliary army. So
Seems I am. I will get some photos up
expand on
and around. So because I've got them,
sure.
base coated. So we'll get cracking on those because
Piece of
I've really
cake.
enjoyed those. So they have taken up all my hobby in interest.
Right.
Although I have got my feelers out there. I'm thinking of doing maybe some nights in the future. Got the
Ooh,
early
what
planning stages for some nights,
big nights.
big nights.
Cool. They are awesome. Awesome stuff.
What
Well,
about
I've
you?
I've
What have you been
done
up to?
naffle the whole of February's disappeared. Completely disappeared, like
Blink
with
and you miss it. Yeah.
podcasting and baby and birthday parties and going out, and yeah, it's been one of them. So I built a dragon for Age of Sigmar.
Oh, I
Sorry,
saw that on.
for the
I
old
saw you
world.
put some pictures up about that. Yeah. Which dragon was that? Was it a?
That's
Is
the
that a
new.
chaos dragon?
No, it's the new Stormcast dragon, Ionis Cryptborn.
Okay.
But he is about the size of a Chaos Warrior himself. So I'm going to have a look through some of the Chaos Warrior bits I've got and see how much of the rider I keep. He's got some like his mace is quite because he's a um, relictor they call them, which is kind of like a
Sort of
guardian of
chaplain type
souls and
thing.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of got that look to him. So
Mm.
it can easily I could just put him on. He could be a Chaos Warrior, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to change it up a little bit, or maybe get a rider from somewhere else. But
Mm.
I've done so little hobby outside of that. It's been like lots of, just like, oh, I've got to apply for this, and I've got to do that, and I've got to get that sorted, and I've got to look up this, and I've got to, get new insurance cats, and got to
Oh
do
yeah, I
this.
know. I know the
All
feeling.
that,
Even before we've had this
yeah.
evening session, trying to squeeze in reviewing the food order for the weekend, followed
Oh,
by buying superhero costumes for
yeah.
a baby rave that we're going to.
Oh,
Like
ridiculous, isn't
the
it?
classic things you do.
Yeah,
Try to
indeed.
squeeze
Getting
those
more.
in because you put them off. You're like, if I don't do this now, it's all going to fall apart. Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
do know.
I've had
I do know what you mean. Yeah.
a host of applying for things and sorting things out. So very little done, and editing podcasts. And this
Mm.
episode is not particularly short, so getting that done as well. Losing evenings for going out, things like that, all that fun stuff. So
But you have
yeah,
been
not a
playing
lot
some
going on.
games. You do manage. I'm always impressed that you managed to get out and
Well,
play
Tuesday
games.
nights is, I mean, this is another reason, like, go out on Tuesday night to play a game or something. So that's
Mm.
one evening gone, straight away. So, um, yeah, I haven't played much Heresy, but
Well,
we're
you
getting
say
there.
that you've played games in the Heresy setting. I mean, we'll be discussing this later, but
Well, yeah,
we were at Beachhead, and that
I
was
mean,
all Titanicus. I
again,
mean,
that's a
that
whole
was
weekend of any,
yeah,
like, that's
exactly,
the whole
yeah.
weekend. And then when you come back from that as well, it's spending time with the missus and the baby, so you then lose other time as well. So it's a knock-on effect from that, which is fine. It is what it is at the end of the day. My yearly plan is completely behind schedule, which again is fine because I knew it would be. Um, but like I've got to look at the next event I'm going to, and then work out what I need to take, what I need to do it, and potentially the one after that as well. And whether I
Wow.
try and do something similar, work it out whether I borrow some stuff, but to actually get a plan to work towards something as a goal to force me to get that paints out rather than building something else that I've got sitting in a box
Hmm.
somewhere. That kind of thing. Far too tempting, but hey, it's all
Cool.
good fun. Should we have a look at what GW have been
Yes,
doing?
there's been a
Okay.
fair bit
We're
of
going to
news, I
try,
think.
we're going to endeavour to make this section a little bit tighter. So
Yeah, because
we're going to
otherwise we
change it up a
do
little bit.
tend to go a bit
Oh,
nuts. Or that's probably
yeah.
my fault.
No, it's both of us. So they showed off a couple of characters,
Hmm.
one of which is available, the Siegebreaker.
That was quick, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, very cool model. I really like that. Siegebreaker's not seen a huge amount. Do you want a Siegebreaker with a Thunder Hammer? Well, it looks good. Again, if you don't want him, cut the hand off, put someone else on. It's fine. The console thing is awesome.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
I think
it's a
it's a
cool little, and
fantastic
particularly
model.
it's a little grab thing, a sort of slightly higher technology because it's 30K. The armor's super cool.
Yeah, I really like that. So good. I'm never worried about if the head's good or not because you can always get a different head or put a helmet on. So yeah. I don't mind the head. But yeah, I think it's a super cool model with lots of. You could potentially use it for a variety of things as well.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be like restricted there to a siege breaker.
No, I think you could quite quickly make him a master of signal as well.
Yeah, not just that. Like I'm sure there's stuff you could do tech marine wise with him and as well.
Iron
And
fathers,
all that kind of juicy stuff. Yeah. The next one though, Endred Har, which
that was
apparently
a big deal, wasn't it?
I think this came out like not long after we released the episode, and we were talking about this, and someone literally posted like Greg's just literally talking about this very kind of thing, and then they released Endred Har. Yeah, I think this is one of the better named characters they've done in a while.
I would agree with that.
Partly just because it's so different,
and that I think it feels like they've taken someone's really been kind of let off the leash with this. It feels like someone's really experimented with some stuff. I mean, there's quite a lot of different features on it that are new. When I first saw it, and I'd love to see it in person. When I first saw it, I felt his head was too small in this model. It made the proportioning all seemed a bit strange. I'm like, where is his arm? Where's his shoulder in relation to his head inside this enormous armor that he's wearing? But
never
I mean,
asked that with Space Marines.
No, exactly. That's what I mean. What I mean is, it was making me ask that question, even though there's a pretty wide latitude of what there's already quite a suspension of disbelief. The battle damage. I don't remember a Marine they've done it on.
No.
There is a fantastic classic piece of art, that black and white Black Templar, who's sort of holding a bolt gun up, and he's got super damaged armor, and as is a Marine in the foreground. And you just don't tend to see it in the models.
No,
just nailed it here.
Not to this level, but the old Wolfen, the metal Wolfen from when they released from the original 13th Black Crusade, they had various mixed armors from the Space Wolf, and then Chaos bits and pieces, and some of that was damaged, but not to this extent.
No.
Yeah, that shoulder plate, that's been on his left arm. It's pretty cool. The right arm's pretty cool as well, to be fair. And I love the World Eaters. Nods to the World Eaters on the back.
But they're broken. Yeah,
super cool. And it's
love that one.
He's a beast as well, Endred Har. Going up to strength 12 with his Power Fist. That's going to be a fun one for like instant killing jet bikes. Not jet bikes. Land speeders, toughness 6, I think. Things like that. Yeah, super cool model and bodes very well for Black Shields going forwards. What else did they show off? They showed off a Basilisk and Medusa kit for Solar Auxilia with loads of detail that I will never paint.
Particularly interior detail.
That's what I mean. Never going to paint that.
I was amazed that they've done that. They haven't done something like that since the Land Raider?
Well, the Mastodon had loads.
Okay. I'm talking about a plastic kit. But okay.
I think there's a few. Like the flyers.
I suppose the Knights have got some of it.
But the level
to this degree,
it's quite a lot. It's super cool. Like 2 dudes in there. You take them out, use them for something else. Which is cool. There's some cool stuff in that. Absolutely lovely little kits, like nice little updates. Plastics, brilliant. Like at the end of the day, more plastics. Not the greatest things in the game, but who cares?
You don't play Auxilia started. I've seen quite a few conversations online about how useful the Earthshaker and the Basilisk and the Medusa are in general. Comparing them, perhaps unfairly, is that it's just extreme to compare them with the first edition of the game and the power that they had at that point. But still,
Well, I don't think
it's elicited a conversation.
Yeah, I don't think it's unfair to compare their their ability on the battlefield, like not a direct comparison of stats or anything, but the fact is now, are you that worried when a basilisk fires on you? Yeah, okay, like that's not great, but not like in the first edition of the game when you were like, oh
But,
shoot, I really hope that doesn't
here we
hit.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a again, like in however many years time, if we get a second edition of a third edition 2.5, whatever you want to call it, like a slight adjustment to maybe increasing the size of some of the templates. So the small guns that have small templates having bigger templates but staying roughly the same rules wouldn't be bad, or adjusting rules within that so they're not you're not wiping off whole squads in one go maybe, but you are scaring the enemy when a huge mortar shell from a tank like hundreds of meters away actually does hit. There's a balance to be had there, but yeah, no, they look really cool, and plastic just means you're more likely to see them even if they're not. Like, it's always hard to go and spend resin money on something where the rules are lackluster. Much easier to spend plastic money when the rules are lackluster.
That's true.
So it will help see them on the battlefield, and they look cool. They look super cool. We're finally going to get the Stormseer, the Dark Emissary, and the Apothecarians. That's pretty cool. But they were showed off a while
It was
ago.
a real catch-up release there, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Obviously, there's who knows? There's so much stuff going on. Also, the Green Knight, although he's going to be metal, isn't he? Ugh, don't want metal models. So tough. Ignore that. We also had the Atheon Heavy Sentinel rules released, which is pretty nice. They've given them out free because it's available before the book. We don't know when the book's coming. 70 points, strength 6, toughness 6, 5 wounds, 2 up save, cavalry, so it can't be put in transports, unlike other sentinels could at one point.
Yeah, it's sort of strange. Is it? Well, they've added this new subtype, haven't they? Mechanized.
It's in the. It's not new, is it? It's in one of the books already.
Is it?
Yeah, I think it's in one of the PDF books.
I've taken Warhammer Community at their word. It said that the units of cavalry assigned the new mechanized unit subtype.
Oh, maybe it's been updated. I haven't actually fully looked. So, poison and flesh bane must be re-rolled. Failed to wound rolls made for weapons with the armor bane rule against the unit must be re-rolled. So, failed to wound roll. So you get a negative against armor bane, which is fair enough. May attack with all the weapons it has, including reactions when shooting. May attack with heavy ordnance weapons, also kind of stationary. Is affected by haywire. I might have it's because of the update, because I think the mechanized weren't before. I could be wrong. But it can be haywire detonation and battlesmith as if it's a dreadnought, and may join the no model that's not mechanized. So nothing stellar in there, just clearing up a few things. But 70 points, you can have autocannon, Volkite Culverin, las cannon, heavy incinerator, melter lance, and up to 4 hunter killer missiles. It is ballistic skill 3, which is always a problem.
That is a shame. When it's also a heavy support choice.
Yeah.
The heavy support choice is
them.
The heavy support choice is highly contested.
Yeah, that's always the problem, right?
In general, but particularly, I would say, with this army.
And 90 points for one las cannon. It's on a toughness 6 body with a 2 up save, so that's not bad. But
no, it's pretty resilient. I just think I feel like if it was ballistic skill 4, that would make things like the hunter killers a bit more appealing, and it would also be okay. Now I've got a bit of a choice there. Whereas it makes it a less appealing choice when it's in the heavy support slot. Ballistic skill 3, when it's fast attack, I'd be a bit more relaxed about.
And that's the argument, right? Cool. So you get a weapon and the Atheon missile battery. So that's 30-inch, strength 4, AP5, assault 1, large blast 5, barrage twin linked. So yeah, again, not stellar. Large blast's good on that though.
Yeah, you're going to be
Cool.
causing quite a lot of saves.
Lots of twin linked as well, so a lot of saves coming off there. Heavy incinerators. It can have a template strength 6, AP4, torrent, assault 1, torrent 6. Yeah.
Yeah.
How fast are they? Hold on, they're movement 7.
7.
And they're cavalry. Okay.
And they're heavy, so they can't run.
No. So heavy incinerator. Yeah, I mean stuff will come at you, but a hard choice, I think. The melter lance, 18-inch range, strength 8, AP1, heavy 1, armor bane, ranged.
Yes, that was cool. So it's the first time we've seen a melter weapon, I think, with the melter rule coming into play over its entire range rather than at half range. So that makes it quite an interesting weapon.
Yeah,
A lot of people saying it should have just been a multi-melter.
Yeah, I mean, multi-melter would give you 24-inch range. I don't know, to be honest. Like, it's nice to have some differences, but then you've got to remember what's different about it. So it's like, is that what Armor Bane ranged does? Is it the whole thing?
Yeah, it's the full. It means that it's out
It
of the
does.
full.
I couldn't remember.
Range.
Confirmed. Was getting basically someone was questioning it. I was like, okay, in Imperialis, that means it's just different. But I couldn't remember exactly, but that's cool. Yeah, so an 18-inch armor bane is pretty good, to be fair. An extra 6 inches, like I'm giving up that 6-inch of the multi melter to get that is not a bad thing on a 25. That's a 25-inch threat range.
Yeah, exactly. That makes that quite a compelling.
But hitting on a 4th
weapon. That is the thing. If it was sort of if it had
5,
2 shots,
if it's dark,
that would be quite nice. Yeah, yeah. If it had 2 shots, if it fired twice, that would be quite cool.
I mean, yeah, that'd be
just to
very
mitigate
cool.
the ballistic skill 4.
That would be 95 points for that would be pretty amazing, to be fair.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, the pricing, I think it feels probably just about right. I do wonder if some of the anti-infantry weapons make more sense because it combos with the missiles better.
Maybe, but again, when you're picking your heavy, you've got a lot of infantry or whatever that you need to be able to take out things like dreadnoughts and tanks.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, there's a lot of armored things running around.
Yeah, so like 95 points for that. I think there are other things in the book which are probably better points efficiency, but they're cool or they're not cool. Like again, like they're going to divide opinion, which is a good thing because that means there's variety. But I quite like them. I think they're kind of funky. And you can have squads of 3.
It's a super cool model, and in squads of 3.
Yeah.
Someone pointed out an interesting rules conundrum, particularly given that they've created a specific subtype for this. There's nothing that says that they're fearless or stubborn or by nature of what they are. They don't have access to Vox or anything, so they can, in theory, be swept. And they're not great in combat. So a fairly middling unit could assault these. A unit of 3 of them, beat them, they fall back and they're swooping about and destroy them.
Yeah, if you've got like one power fist, and I mean you'll be facing a few strength 6 hits coming back. Yeah, potentially. Yeah,
Just it's an interesting thing. You sort of imagine they'd be fearless or stubborn or something like that, but they don't get stubborn from the cohort rule.
However, I think bearing in mind there's one human dude driving it, and if you've got 10 Space Marines running at you and they're putting wounds on you, I don't mind either way. Like the dude going, they're swarming me. I need to get out of here.
Yeah, true.
Backing up, tripping over, like falling down, or the, as you say, these Space Marines jumping up, ripping the canopy off.
There was quite a lot of people saying, "Have you seen the Ewoks?" You're like,
yeah, essentially, yeah.
They destroyed ATSTs plenty. So
yeah. So again, whichever way they go with it, I don't have a problem. Which is cool. There was a lot of chat about the Big Armor book, which we kind of covered, so not worried about that. Warhammer World Anniversary, which will be after this before this comes out, actually. Now I suspect. Yeah, that's cool. So hopefully, what's interesting is this goose, right? There's a lot of chat.
Just an entertaining phrase.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of chat that you can't see the legs of it. Is that because it's wearing socks? Because there's a Blood Bowl rule in Blood Bowl in the universe game that you have to wear socks. So all the critters that are allowed in Blood
Oh
Bowl have
wow.
socks. So they might be hiding the feet because it's a Blood Bowl goose, which would
I've
fit.
I've got the feeling it is Blood Bowl.
Yeah, because like what else is a goose doing anywhere? Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's cool. If you've been to that, I don't think this is going to come out on the Saturday. So if you've been to that, I hope you've had fun. But yeah, I think generally we're building up to the release of the new books for Imperialis and for 30k.
Which are going to have a big impact, particularly in the case of Legion.
Yeah, and so this is coming. This is the early March episode. Next episode will have had Adepticon, so they've got big release kind of reveal show at Adepticon. So I'm sure we'll have one or two things there to be shown off and talked about. But yeah, I think that's it. What is interesting is we talked. I will just add this on. We talked last time about the Black Library Weekender and them announcing, like, if they don't announce what's coming next, why didn't they release their last Heresy book on their big Black Library Weekender show? And they didn't announce anything.
No.
Absolutely mind-boggling that they didn't then utilize that
week. It seemed so low-key. The whole thing seemed really low-key somehow.
Oh, shoot. We should have done something. We got a Black Library celebration coming up. Sorry, weekender. Got a Black Library. Has anyone organised anything? No. I've already sent the email about the book coming out. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Missed opportunities there, I think.
Yeah. That's kind of par for the course. Sadly, with BL at times in recent years, but such is life. Fingers crossed that with things they might turn it up a little bit for future events.
If they are leaving a gap between Heresy and what's next, I think that's cool. But yeah, I just think it was a bit silly not to have that release then. Hey ho, what can you do? That library
leaves more exciting. Yeah, quite. Yeah, that library doing what they can. Yeah.
Yeah, go and listen to Michael at Tracker Words. Go and read his blog.
He's got some views on that. Yeah,
he's got some views. The frustrations of that library, bless them.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think that's
it. Kind of covers the news. Yeah,
it was quite a light one, which is good.
Yes, which makes our more focused review even easier.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Hopefully you guys like that. We've got there's a lot in this show. We're finally recording this in probably the way we should, where we've recorded the subjects and then we're recording the intro afterwards. We know what we've talked about, so I can actually say we have got some talk about Beachhead 80, and we have some chat about the End of the Death, parts 1, 2, and 3. Which is a nice thing to do because we should do it that way. But I will just reiterate here. If you have any feedback, any questions, anything about any of those the subjects we talk about, the books, or you want to know more about the AT event, or you think we got something completely wrong, then email Greg at theimperialtruth.com is probably the best way, and we can feed that back into the show. Because I think there's a lot to talk about at the End of the Death, and we get into it a bit, but if we had
we kept it
8-hour
reasonably
show,
I think we tried to keep it reasonably focused, but we could talk about that for days. No trouble at all.
For sure. Awesome. Okay, well, let's get on with the rest of the show then. Well, let's look into our trip down to sunny Bournemouth.
I wish it was sunny Bournemouth. I wish it was a sunny Bournemouth experience, but was a little bit grey, but yes, fun trip it was too, wasn't it?
Indeed. So this is for the Maximal Fire AT event as part of the Beachhead. What do you call it? It's a
Convention,
convention.
show.
Yeah, it's yeah, yeah. Show is probably a better word actually. So it's my first time. You went last year, and
Yeah,
you're
I've been to
familiar
a
with
few of them.
Bournemouth.
I've been
Oh,
to a
have you?
few of them. Yeah, and
But it's
Bournemouth
good.
is my old, well, Bournemouth, not Bournemouth, but I'm from Dorset originally, and my family is still down there, so I still go down there frequently. And I used to go over to Bournemouth most weekends, and there is quite a wargaming scene, it seems, in and around the area and the south coast. And so Beachhead, which has been going for about 4 years or so, I think, 4 or 5 years, in the Bournemouth International Centre, there is over 2 days, and it is all things wargaming. It's a mixture of tournaments or sort of gaming events going on in one half of it, I suppose, and then the other half is demonstration games, vendors, people doing cosplay, board games, all sorts of range of games from historicals to sort of fun, unusual games. There's a big Titan walk there. As I say, it's over the 2 days. It's grown.
So
It's put on through Entoyment, which is one of the local store. It is the sort of biggest local store really in
yeah.
Poole. Yeah, and it seems to have grown quite a bit. It was covered in the local news, so much so it was there. But it was good. I thought it's built year on year to be something that's really quite
So
substantial now.
when did you first start going there? Yeah,
I would have
roughly.
gone there the first time I went there. See, it all gets a bit weird now because of COVID. I feel like it
Yeah,
might have been
it does.
pre. Feels weird to say it was pre-COVID because to say
There's not
I
that
went
many
to I've
years that events have been running since COVID, have there? Really?
no. This is the thing. There's not enough years let for it to have run. If you see what I mean,
Yeah,
I
it's
went to one
blended
and
time.
didn't play in the event.
Yeah,
Then I've been to one and
no
did
worries.
play in the
That's all
event,
right.
and now then there's this one. So I've been to at least three.
Cool. So, yeah, so there's a hall with vendors and, as you say, demonstration games, things like that there, and then there's one large hall and some other areas where they were playing events.
Hmm.
And in the entrance hall as well, there's a like board game cafe kind of feel going on
Hmm.
thing. What was really interesting is the vendor area was had a very well, no, not all of it, but like 50% of it had an old school vendor hall convention vibe, like
Hmm.
Reading Warfare, or even like in Tunbridge we have Cavalier, which is very much all historical, slightly older chaps with interesting facial hair, um, with tables that are 10 foot by like 5 foot with about 20 models on them because they are doing the 10 British troops that parachuted into this vast area of Holland
Yeah.
or wherever it is. That kind of classic English wargaming kind of trope. And then some more modern stuff with, let's say, Entoyment and a few people like that, and some Kickstarter games trying to show off. What was really interesting was like some crystals, quite a bit of D&D dice and things like that, and some like even the person selling crystals
Yeah, there was a
with
few
things.
alternative things there, wasn't there? There was like a lightsaber maker was there, and you said
Yeah,
there was sort of crystals and all very much alternative
with
culture.
only
Comic books featured. Yeah.
yes, yeah, with like a smallish board game presence, compared to
Hmm.
everything else. I was a bit surprised how much of it was that, but it's an interesting mix for sure, and some old faces as well. There's some people who go to a lot of these things, even they travel miles to go to them. And John was there, good old John from the Heresy scene. For those who are
Yeah.
weekenders, will know him very well. And as you say, the time walk was thrown in there as well. It was quite a nice feel, quite a good. I just want to give kind of a little bit of a thing to the event itself.
No, I
Um,
agree. I think
the
the
place
overall
selling
event
the
is
best
great.
Valentine's cards ever, which went down a treat.
So handy.
Um, yeah, indeed, just a geeky "I love you more than I love my models" Valentine's card, which wasn't too sappy, which is pretty cool. Um, and was the last. Oh shoot, we need to buy one of those for like 5 days time. That will do perfectly. So Yeah, wonderful. So yeah, that was that, and then the gaming. My kind of half my point here is the gaming hall was dominated by 40k, Age of Sigmar, Adeptus Titanicus, Blood Bowl, 30k in the big hall, and then there was some other gaming going on around the corners, some card game
Legion,
stuff.
Star Wars Legion was
There
there.
was
Yeah, I
some
didn't see what
Legion,
card games
yes,
were
of
playing.
course, they were next to us. But there were some, and then there were some of the older traditional war games kind of looking tables as well. But it was very much felt like a modern gaming kind of, the game side of it felt very modern.
I mean, I've been to a few shows. I mean, the first ones I went to when I was much younger. I was first into the hobby. Was down in the same sort of area, down in Weymouth. There was a thing called Fisticuffs, and that was the old school, like you're talking about. There was lots of green fields,
Yeah,
World War II type games with more or Napoleonics and historicals. There's a mix of that, and all the shows you were mentioning as well have that. But it's it's a relatively unusual thing to have something of that size that's got that much gaming in terms of sort of tournaments and things going on, and also that kind of vendor and exhibition side of it as well. There's not a great deal. I mean, you kind of got Selweg, Selweg in London, but that
yeah,
doesn't have the
Reading
tournaments
Warfare
playing. Yeah, but I thought
is
it's a
the big
nice mix.
one.
Yeah,
There's
you
a
get
few
that.
up north, but I mean it's just hard in the UK to find venues like that.
Yeah,
The venue is really good for it, like the kind of at capacity in that area for
yes,
everything they want to do. But I mean, talk about being right in the centre of town. It's a bit like Cardiff in that it's a few minutes walk to be literally in the centre of town. We stayed
yes,
at a hotel that was 40 metres away,
yeah.
which was very reasonably priced as well.
Bournemouth
Time of
is
year
well off,
helped.
given what it is, but as a seaside holiday destination, it's well off for hotels. And as you say, the that centre, the Bournemouth International Centre, Convention Centre, is right in the centre of town.
Yeah.
So it was well catered for. Loads of places to go out and
It's
socialise afterwards, which is kind of what I go to those events for.
Yeah, a very traditional seaside town in terms of hotels that I reckon 20, 30 years ago might have been, or 40, 50 years ago might have been a bit nicer than they are now. But, that is just nature of seaside towns in the UK. But yeah, no, it was a good venue. Actually, yeah, as I say, Bournemouth is only 2.5 hour drive for me. It feels like it should be a lot longer, and it's only like 3 roads, so it's pretty
Well,
simple to
same
get to as well.
for me and our friend, our teammate Ant, travelling down from London. It's 2 hours on the train.
Yeah,
People were describing it as a commuter town. Perhaps a bit of a
it's
stretch, but
crazy.
it's pretty straightforward to get to.
Yeah, it's no Seven Oaks, is it? But
No, exactly. Yeah,
but hey,
no, it was a good location. It was a good
yes,
location, and I'm glad to see the event going from strength to strength.
yeah, indeed. And I must admit, I know a few guys down that way from the old Warhammer scene, and not too far away, like Southampton way from Heresy. So yeah, and recognise a few 40k people who've travelled more than living that way, but um, so it's a decent enough place to get to. So next year, I will pencil it in, and it will be penciled in because there'll be a lot of stuff going on next year. But
Mm.
what event I take part in, particularly with the guys talking about maybe mixing it up. But yeah, it's on the calendar as an option.
Yes,
So
particularly as it covers so many things, and
yeah,
there's not a lot happening at the same time of year. It's quite well
yeah.
positioned, I think, in the calendar.
Well, I mean, the way it is now, if you play, I could think of a number of Heresy events that going to Bournemouth for that weekend would restrict me because they're within 2 weeks of it.
Yeah,
Uh,
fair enough. Yeah, it's
so
not a question of
and
it's something on the
yeah,
same weekend. It's even if it's within a month.
yeah,
It gets a bit pressured, doesn't it? Yeah,
and 40k, there's just events everywhere all the time. And
yeah.
heresies, there's quite a few because of this shift to slightly smaller heresy events,
Mm.
or maybe a few of the bigger ones. They used to be not being quite so, and I'm part of that because I'm not running the bigger events. Um, there are more smaller events. People are happier to have 20 or 30 people, which is fine, which is all
Mm.
good. So there are more events. Anyway, right. So that's a brief bit. the event in itself and the venue. And that was Titanicus. So you went last year to this team event, and
I did.
we talked about it on the show, and you raved about it. As in being great fun, good people, and this team kind of thing of working as a team, playing against another team, playing off, and it being different and super fun because of that.
Really enjoyed it. Yeah, agree.
And we decided, you know what, let's do it. Let's get a team together. Let's head down and play some AT. Now, it's been a while since I played some Titanicus because there aren't many people in my area. Fingers crossed with LI, we will drag some people in, but it very much is not a widespread game in this area. So I didn't even get any practice games in. We talked about it on the show. You did.
Yes.
How
Albeit,
kind of
we call they were practice games. Yeah, is perhaps a stretch, but it was at least some games.
relearning?
Yeah, it was in cases of having to help our teammate through creating a list, and a game that should have taken 2.5 hours ended up taking about 8. But
Sure.
that was
I
a
can
different
imagine.
kind of
I can
story
imagine.
altogether. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that was a whole different ballgame. That thing. But anyway, yes, I still got a game in, and there is quite a bit of Titanicus running. Quite a few teams actually, and there could have been more teams going down. There have been more teams going down in the past from London.
yeah.
The London scene's got a fair few people playing Titanicus, but but we got a team together and
Yeah.
headed on down.
So I feel like it took me a while to get back in the swing of Titanicus. There's a few little things I was like, oh, is that how that works? And I wasn't always wrong. Let's put it that way. But uh, kind of just a couple of reminders every now and then, little things I would forget because it's been a while, that kind of stuff. Having to borrow weapons off people because after making a list, realizing, oh yeah, I never did buy those weapons, or what have you. That kind of fun. That's always there.
There is actually quite a lot of kit you need. You do need to be
Yeah,
quite reasonably well. I mean, you could kind of say this for any gaming focused event, couldn't you? But Titanicus in particular, there's a fair bit. You want to have your weapons cards, your terminals. You want to make things look good. You've got to think it through. There's quite a bit of tokens. There's
but it's
tape measures.
also not necessarily straightforward to get a hold of that information or
No.
the things you require. So if you're playing 40k, the chances are most of the Forge World stuff isn't particularly in the best armies and stuff people use. Um, so you might see it a little bit, but generally you can get a codex, and then if the stuff's available through stock, it's buying a box of dudes and arming them with that
Mm.
box. Titanicus, it's okay, cool, yeah, I've got Reavers. Oh shoot, which Reavers have I got? And where did I put all the arms? Because I'm painting them separately. And then, oh, I bought this. I got Legions Imperialis, and I've got the Warhound
Mm.
weapons from that, but I haven't downloaded the cards, which I then need to cut out. You know, all that kind of stuff
Yeah.
does feed into it. You know, um, is what it is, but
Yeah. It's not.
it's not straightforward.
It's not huge, but it's not as straightforward perhaps as it has got an extra level of stuff to kind of prepare
Indeed.
and think through. Like you say, you can get caught out a little bit going, oh, I thought I had that. I've seen that. Or maybe I didn't get that box. Maybe I got it that way. Yeah, you're right. You've got to think that thing through.
I've got I've got a box somewhere that's got a load of Titan weapons
Mm,
in it, and I'm not 100% sure where they are. So I'm
mm,
going to have to do some digging. And I never did put in the order for various weapons from what was Forge World. So that is something I need to look into when I have some time and some cashola. But yeah. So what did you bring?
I copped out slightly and went with what I took last time with a few tweaks because new things had come along. I took Legio Astorum and I took them in the Regia Maniple, which is 2 warlords in this case and 3 warhounds. Agonized over it was a 1750 list. This time, in a slight variation to last year, it was a 5 games in all at 1750 whereas last year it was 2,000 points on the Sunday, the last two games. So there was just one list through the whole thing. I considered, rather than the extra Warhound, the third Warhound, I considered swapping that for some Knights. Decided to stick with just the Titans because Titans are cool and they would benefit more from the mana pool.
Yeah.
Extra rules, and I switched out some of the weapons because I wanted to try out the Swarmer missiles, and I thought with the Swarmer missiles as an option, that opened up the option to take a conversion beamer as well. So that Warhound, whereas previously they had all been armed identically with the classic plasma Vulcan Mega Bolter, I switched one of those to the Swarmer and conversion beamer, and in so doing, freed up a few points and switched around a few things. I put some Apocalypse missile launchers on one of the Warlords rather than the Gatling blasters. Both Warlords are normally Gatling blasters on the roof, macro Gatling on one arm and Sun Fury on the other. But this time I put the Apocalypse missiles on one just to give that extra range, and I put some Hunter shells in one of the macro Gatlings for just finishing things off. It gives you the one round of targeted shots with no penalty. And that was it, really. That was the list as a summary.
We also had to pick stratagems, didn't we? So
we did, which was challenging. And obviously Warlord traits and things.
And
oh goodness, I'm going to flip that up now to go and get that. But off the top, it was six. It was a six stratagem hand, as per the match play guide. It's a six stratagem hand, of which you could, assuming you were playing a single Legio on the other side of the table. You were generally playing with five stratagem points.
Yeah, don't need to tell us all the intricate details.
I can't remember. I can't remember
what the cannon
were. That definitely featured because, like putting that on the Sun Fury, that was definitely there.
Concealment
the classics
or
of concealment barrage. I went with concealment. I didn't take blind barrage, and having had that used against me repeatedly, that might change in the future. I did have the Astorum specific Machine Defiance, I think it is, which is where you roll. I may have got that name wrong, but it was where when your shields burst once per game. When your shields burst you play this, and you roll a dice for each of the servitor clades, and on a 5 or a 6, you get a shield back, which is quite handy for particularly in a quite tanky list, which is what the sort of Red Year is all about, really. Is about, and particularly with the Storeroom, with your re-roll of the servitor clades on Warlords and Warhounds. So yeah, that was kind of the way I was playing it, and there were a lot more Regia mana pools. Last time I was one of only 2, and this time I would say it was. I mean, we'll see. Maximal Fire do a very good job with reporting on the stats and things from the weekend, and they will no doubt publish how many and different types of mana pool that were featuring. But I played against 2, and I saw several others being played there as well. So I think we'll see a lot more of those. I think that's a pretty thorough overview of my list.
Cool.
What did you take?
I bought a Praesagius Dominus mana pool. So for those who aren't aware, Dominus is you can get Knights to go along with your mana pool, which is like 2 Reavers and a White Lord and 2 Hounds, I think it is, of which I had one Hound because it's 1750. Points is tight because you have to have at least one unit of Knights, and one's not really enough to make that work. So I had 1 unit of Questoris Knights, just really cheap, with Gatlings, and 1 unit of Lancers, because they're good. And essentially the mana pool allows you to, so if you're wholly within 6 inches, if they have a unit of Knights wholly within 6 inches of a Titan, that Titan is -1 to be shot at. The Knights themselves can never benefit from cover during this. And then if you're within 6 inches of a Knight, and your Titan is hit, you may shift that hit to a Knight within 6 inches. So that's individual Knights. So it can be extremely defensive. I've had games with it where people are like, "Oh, I have to shoot your Titan," and you pass Vulcan Mega Bolter saves onto a unit of 3 Knight Lancers, you might lose a point of damage. that kind of thing. So it has potential to be quite a powerful ability. Potential. And stratagems. My warlord was plasma Gatling missiles on top. Reavers were both melter Gatling with bolters, Vulcan mega bolters on top, and then I took a swarmer beamer warhound, which was a last minute change for the worse, but as they sometimes
From
are.
what?
From double swarmer at
Double
the
swarmer.
time. Yeah, just felt I needed to get shields down, and I might not be able to necessarily do it from short range. I want to be able to take in shields down immediately. With this list, I need to start hurting people. And then so overcharge cannon for the big guy for the plasma. I took Titan Hunter infantry as a kind of it can be really cool. What else did I have? I had the blind barrage. I had the long march, which is loyalist only, where you can for one turn you can ignore the kind of arc in which you're moving, so you can move full distance any
I've
direction.
just looked up my stratagems, and I also had that. That's the long retreat.
Long retreat, sorry, yeah, that's fantastic. Long march is
Only
such a
because
horse thing.
I got it in front of me. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What else did I take? I took the Presagius one, which is long range for a turn. I can't remember my last one.
You and I both took sabotage.
Oh, sabotage, yes, indeed. I will spoiler. I never used sabotage once.
I used it once. I was
Only,
expecting to use it a lot, and like you,
yeah,
just in my case, just once.
I never came up against any full-on combat legios, and
No, me neither.
I also wanted to use it a couple of times, but the enemy wasn't on an order, so I couldn't do it. It's rubbish. But yeah, that was my force, rough and ready. Quite
You
enjoyed
don't
procedures.
you don't tend to see Dominus.
There was one other there, I think.
Yeah,
You don't see
exactly. It's a
Dominus,
relatively
and
rare, which I
we
thought
might
was a
get
good
into
thing to
that.
take. Yeah.
We might get into that. Let's not. Let's talk about the event. Let's talk about our games first. Yeah, and then we'll kind of review the event and stuff
Yeah.
afterwards, like the final bit of it. We're not going to go blow by blow on games. First game I ended up getting a guy I know from the Heresy scene. Rob's come to us a few of my events before, Mr. Rob Hoyle, and it was good to be able to play someone I knew, especially when I'm a bit rusty on the rules and things like that. And he had, what Legio? I can't remember the Legio he had, but he had a Lupercal maniple with quite a few knights. So it's lancers, and he
Oh
had
yes, he had some of the biggest number of knights possibly of the
he,
event. He had loads, didn't he?
he had the Armigers, like a decent chunk in units of Armigers,
Yeah.
and basically his view is knights work better like that than they do in the Knight Lance. They have more impact on that. I'm not going to get too much into the game. It's been a little while. I am absolutely shattered, by the way. So if I ramble in a bit, babies, man, babies. It was something like he wasn't Volpa, but it was something like where he wanted to get up close for his legion. I cannot remember what it was for the life of me. It might just be the Lupercal and the knights that making him want to get in early. He targeted my knights really early with his Vulcan Megabolt Plasma Warhounds, as you do, and I targeted some of his early. I can't get those lancers in straight away, but I moved up the table to try and get position in, and he moved up. And essentially, this game came down to he destroyed my knights with ease, and I pushed too far up turn one,
Right.
which meant that his knights could get into me. I couldn't make. I've written shield saves down here, which suggests that my shield saves were appalling, um, uh, and I just couldn't get onto the objectives. I can't remember. I had the three objectives, each one of them worth like 5 points each or whatever near my territory. And he had to come forwards for an objective as well, and I managed to keep him off any of mine, and I snuck some points in, for that, but he got his primary, I'm pretty sure, and I got a few. We got a few points around it, but yeah, just basically far too aggressive turn one, forgetting kind of how maneuverable knights are with Titans and how devastating like plasma blast cannons are the nuts. Like arguably the best gun in the game.
It's quite a strong case for that.
When you comparative size and whatever, a cracking game. Rob's a good lad. So just trying to get back into the rules, realizing I was in trouble right from the start, but causing some problems.
It was quite a good way in, I thought, to the event. The fact you were playing someone you knew,
always
you
helpful.
were guaranteed going to be a fun game, particularly as you were sort of refreshing your memory with Titanicus as well. It worked out quite well because it was we as everyone was in a group, we paired ourselves off, didn't we? It was kind of go for it. Yeah. In that first round, it was random essentially in terms of grab the person next to you. I was a bit late into the room, I seem to remember. I think I ended up.
Yes, you were.
Yes, did you? I for whatever reason, I came in a bit later and had been sorting something out, and there was a family group there together because we were in teams of three. There was a family there of mum and dad and their son, and I ended up playing the son, who it's not the sort of thing you ask. I didn't ask his age, but I would have said he was probably 12 or 14 in that kind of ballpark.
12,
so quite the youngest there by a distance. That he was an absolute pleasure, an absolute credit to the game. I would say we had a hell of a game that first one. He took the rather unusual, and I think it might be unique in the room. He took a War Master.
Which one?
A Lupercal. He took the regular War Master rather than the Iconoclast. Yeah. And the family as a whole, their team name was the Black Parade, and they were all Mortis, using his dad's complete Mortis collection across the three of them. So that was quite cool. And they were all playing next to each other in appropriate Mortis styled costumes as well, which was even cooler. We played, I forgot, no way am I going to remember what missions we played because I didn't take my game sheet away. But similarly, I played quite aggressive. So did he. He knew his mana pool really well. He certainly knew how to apply a War Master really well. I had never played against the War Master before. It was quite intimidating, thinking, how the hell am I going to take this down? Basically, I focused on it and eventually took it down. They are tough as nails. It was interesting. Actually, every person I spoke to went, "Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, played against what's that? So you ignored that and killed everything else, did you? And just ignored the War Master?" Yeah. No, I did the opposite. I'll ignore everything else and gun for that. So
it's kind of easier prospect to do it the other way around.
Yeah, quite. So, but with the heavy weight, the ability to at least take a few hits, and with the mana pool, being able to share the shields around quite so easily. That's how I played it, and it was so much fun. Particularly, both of us doing some slightly risky things, and them either sort of paying off or not, and being quite funny when they didn't pay off. Him and me running a very, very heavily damaged Warhound just at the War Master, and the sensible thing would have been for him to back off and shoot it. And he's like, actually, tell you what, no, I'm going to stand my ground and I'm going to crush it under my foot. Like, you stone cold killer. I love that. It was hilarious. So a great start to the game, and as I say, real credit to the scene, I thought.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really good. It's always good to start an event off on the right foot, I find.
Yeah, agree.
Yes, I played Peter Martin in the second game with his double Canis Audax. Trying to remember if these were the ones that were the really well painted ones. But that got nominated. Might have been. Yeah, I think they were. Anyway, I was like, okay, cool, Audax, going to be up in my grill. Had his tokens out to do his deployment, and I was like, right, he's there, and there. I need to make sure I'm not too aggressive. It looks like he's going to try and put, he's got to put everything behind terrain anyway to be covered to deploy it, so I can roughly know where he is. Let's try and work my movement a little bit to generate angles, which led to his turn one being really cagey, not coming forwards, um, uh, which suited me fine actually. And he left kind of one bait warhound. And I thought I can get around there and I can take the bait. That's fine. I appreciate that I'm going to open up my flank a touch here to two warhounds, but I should be able to cover that. And I've always got the long retreat, and I can utilise that really well to pull back in. And I mean, I think it was my warlord firing on one warhound with just like, just. I think this might have been the game you might have been playing behind me, and I've turned around and gone, oh, my plasma, because I learnt my lesson. I didn't take the overcharged plasma against Rob, against all his warhounds, and it was a mistake. It's like, no, because I need the crits to go through. Like, the 1 point of damage on the track is not enough when you're firing a warlord at a warhound. You need to be really hurting them and taking them off the board. So I was like, cool, no worries. Maximal, mega plasma, 4 hits. Yeah, this is juicy. To the body, perfect. 3 1s and a 4. It's like, oh. Okay, and it did end up blowing up by itself, I think, the next turn. But it was a little bit of that. But essentially, I didn't cover, like, the warlord moving out there was kind of fine, but I didn't cover it with the other stuff well enough. And on top of that, Claus. Oh yeah, he eventually he got one warhound directly behind my warlord, and one plasma blast gun killed it in one shot.
One-shotted?
Yep.
Undamaged? Undamaged warlord? Oh my god.
So, yeah, that was fun. 4 hits. Away you go, mate.
Wow.
But
that was a Canis. That wasn't a Ferox Maniple.
No, that was a Canis.
That was a Canis. So he's only getting the +2. Wow. Okay. I mean, only.
So
I mean,
plus 2
still...
plus the rear, so
yeah,
plus 4. So it's 12.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was 4 hits. It was 4 big dice. It was,
Yeah.
It was mental.
It's enough. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was absolutely mental. Again, I was a little bit too aggressive for a Legio that wants to. So Prasagius wants to be in long range because they get to re-roll location dice, which is why you take the mid-range guns, so you can maintain that long range. And I like Prasagius for that. I don't necessarily think it's the greatest, but I really do enjoy the ability to be able to go. I don't need to pinpoint my shots quite as often. I can just go, no, I'm just going to shoot you because...
I've never played them, and I would quite like to, because I do that number of times. I'm making that decision. I'm thinking, do I target and inevitably have a lot less hits? But I know where I'm going to hit, or shall I just play the odds, knowing that I'm quite likely to hit the body, for example? Anyway,
exactly, you've got a decent chance to hit the body on one dice. With re-rolling it, you've got a very good chance.
Exactly.
So the awkward one is when you get the first big hit in and it's legs, and you're like, ooh, do I re-roll it and risk getting a weapon? But that's a different story. But yeah, do you know what's really good at killing knights? It's Ursa's claws.
Oh,
Automatic
wow! Okay.
direct hits. They were ruled here, and I can't remember. It's been a long time since I read the rules on them. But essentially, the ruling there was D3+1 automatic devastating hits. It's like, even lancers go down to that quickly.
Wow.
Yeah,
I also
which is
learned that.
not
I'll
what you
come to
think
that, but
of.
I came to respect Ursa's claws considerably. Later game.
Yeah, it was
against
a little
knights.
bit
Yeah, I've never heard
frustrating.
of that. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good game. Don't get me wrong. That rule interaction's a little bit, and this is, unashamedly, I can say it again. 4 weeks in a row, or whatever. Need a second edition for this game. It just needs to be so many things. Which, when you coming back to the game after a while, it's like, oh yeah, that does work like that. Why does that work like that? That's terrible. Yeah.
It is amazing.
It was really
the
good.
value.
Pete was, yeah.
It is the value of having a little bit of. I mean, a practice game or two is super handy, particularly with people who either know the game or are playing frequently. That is because there's still things I was getting wrong.
Yeah.
In there, I
Even
still
then,
apply damage incorrectly. I still apply when you take, I've always assumed wrongly that when you take damage, when you were at the end of the damage track, that all of those, say you took a devastating hit, I assumed
Right.
you moved the critical thing
Twice.
on twice. You don't. You move it on
Oh,
once,
no, yeah,
as
exactly.
I now know, and things stuck around a bit longer as a result. But it's amazing, those little things that can and
I
interactions that you can
found
mess up.
overall a lot of people playing night damage incorrectly as to
Mm,
when you apply the hit, or not incorrectly. I would have to really double check it, but
mm,
it's whether you treat the night damage as a continuous track once one's dead. So there's
mm,
damage. So if one knight has got one pip left, you do 2 damage. Do you take one pip off and another pip off? It's like to
mm,
me, well, you know you've hit a knight, and I'm pretty sure that you've hit a knight. Like it doesn't quite work that way,
mm.
but there was some inconsistencies for certain. So whether how many people were playing it wrong or whatever. And you know what? Sometimes I was just like whatever. Like if that's the way you play it, let's
Yeah, that's
crack
often
on.
the way I did it. As long as we were
Which
playing it the same way in that game, I was quite happy with it.
yeah, I mean, I'm taking notes for a reason. So I
Mm,
want them to work the way I want they should work. But I was also like, am I that bothered at
mm,
this event at this time? Had I, had I been more, and also, I'm the one not knowing the rule fully. So you know what? That's my own fault.
mm,
Crack on. If I'd start playing more regularly again, I'd be like, right, actually, no, no, sorry, what happens? Because also, that's if you play a rule wrong and then keep doing it, and then you're telling other people it's played wrong, it perpetrates through.
yeah, that's true.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's where, like, I mean, I think we talked about before on some people used to fire one shot, then fire the next weapon as a whole separate weapon. So if they killed a Titan, you could transfer the shot to another Titan, and it's like, well, whoa, 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 how did you even get there, kind of thing.
Mm,
Like,
mm,
you never go back to step one of target allocation, and they're like, oh, but and I'm like, it's fairly clear when you look at it, um, like cold light of day. I have it pointed out. Maybe and it's very. I've only really heard two people do it this way, but they have groups where they started to play that way because that's the way they were then shown how it worked.
mm, mm.
So I think, you know, I know some people just roll for it. And it's like, well, there is value to getting the rules right. You are playing a game with rules. But
Did you
anyway, yeah,
see anyone over the course of the weekend call a TO over for a rules interpretation?
no, there was
Me
one
neither.
point again, but there was one point someone said, oh, they're playing that here this way. They're playing that rule like this.
Mm,
And I was like, are they? Because that
mm,
doesn't that seems like. Uh, I have a little bit of an issue with some way some event, of course, all game systems, event organisers word FAQs, and they have an FAQ, but they actually write an errata and change the way a rule works. Um, and there was one minor thing which it was like, I don't like that. But if I'm going to go and ask, and they're going to say, yeah, it plays like that,
mm,
then I'm just wasting everyone's time. So I
mm.
said, is that the way? They said, yeah, and I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. Again, had I been playing the game more, I might have been like, yeah, cool, let's just double check that they want to do it that way.
Mm.
But I mean, there was one
The
or
only
two things where I asked a question just because I was like, this could go either way. How are you doing that here?
yeah, we did have occasions where people were asking. They would get, like we would ask the people on the next table, particularly
Sure.
when it became clear that people. I mean, I would say there was
You
a
know the
good,
people who play a lot,
yeah, out of the 50 players that I think attended. I think it was 50 people playing. I
right?
would say there was 10 to 12 who were in a whole other whole other band. I would say who were playing a lot and were very good and very knowledgeable about the game
And
and could
yet,
push it.
I will always put a warning out there. That doesn't necessarily mean they got all their rules right.
Absolutely not.
And you need, I think there becomes, and this is from being a tournament player, back in the day, Warhammer a lot, the ability to question in the correct manner and say, oh wow, really cool. I'm just going to look that up because that's like not how I envisioned it, and I just want to make sure I've got it all right, and then go, oh, and on occasion, very good players have gone, oh, the way I read it, it works like this. Here's the rule laid out. Sometimes
Doing that
people
with tact, I think, is quite important. And
you've got to do it the right way.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done it before where some guy was. I've had occasions where I've been cheated by a person. I don't know the reasons why, but it's happened. That one person's happened 3 or 4 times over the course of a few games, and I get to the point where I'm like, can I, oh yeah, that I know there's some crazy rules with this. Can I just have a look at them so while you're doing your movement or whatever, I can have a look through without bugging you? Or, oh, I know that unit had some crazy rules which don't really fit the norm. Can I just check that I'm getting some other bits right? You can do it in a way, and you can always do it if you kind of do it in a self-deprecating way. Then it's really hard for other people to say
as long
no
as you're
if
not
they
doing
are.
it. Ideally, you don't do it in an accusatory way.
Yeah.
That's just helps to avoid there being a needless conflict during what should be an enjoyable
And if you
event.
aren't sure, I mean, there were a couple of times someone said, is this how it works? There was a Dominus thing as well, as you say. Don't see it a lot. So I was like, yeah, this is how it works. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to just double check I'm doing it right. I'm
I would
90%
say
sure.
the etiquette was excellent during my 5 games, where both players were very good at taking the opponent through their entire army list. I mean, kind of Titanicus helps because it's not that much to go through. But we went through what weapons everything had, how it all worked, how familiar you were with it or not, what we were trying to do, what the list was about, Legio rules, all that sort of thing. There was never a I didn't know it worked like that. Oh right,
I
okay,
had
right, cool. There was
1 or
none of that in my games.
2, because of Dominus, I had 1 or 2 instances where people were like, oh, you can just do that. You can take my, I'm opening up with a Vulcan Megabolt and you can just put those hits onto your Lancers. I'm like, yeah. Oh, did you not understand when I described it? That's fine. Do you want to take the movement back? Do you want to, would you have made that choice? And they were like, oh yeah, whatever, don't worry about it. Cool, Anyway, yeah,
My second game.
Peter was a really good player to play against. I can't remember if I won. I won one of the first 2. And it was, but both were tight. I think this one was one. I might have won it, but it been really tight or something. No, I think I might have lost. Anyway, it's all good.
My second game was one of my favourites of the whole weekend against Chris, who is Christoph Paints, I think it is on Instagram. He had an amazing, really beautiful looking Furians. And that was the first Mirror Regia Manipul I played over the weekend, not the last. And it was a hilarious game. We both played Salt the Earth, and we were. I think we did anyway. Is that right? Anyway, it doesn't matter. We just had so much fun exploring it. I was racing my one of my warhounds forward in the early game. I've moved forward quite aggressively as a Storm can do. He played quite defensively. Because of the nature of some of the weapons he had a very long range warlord. One of his warlords was set up that right at the back. He was able to put his warhounds to get in such a way they have quite good range weapons as well. I was really gunning up, knowing that I could with a Storm and manage it reasonably well. And he left one gap in his line, and I just went for it early on, just cannoned through. And he was sort of quite wide-eyed at that. And we were having just such fun with this because we were both playing stratagems backwards and forwards. He did the perfect warp displacement to put his warlord right in front of the warhound. Eventually destroyed it. I can't remember how it ended up. I can't remember. I sort of feel like I snuck a win. I think I did.
You did.
I think, because I seem to remember, I won the first 3 games and lost the last 2 or something like that. Was it?
Did a lead?
No, actually, I can't have.
No.
I can't have.
I think you lost game 3, didn't you?
I can't have won my 3rd game for sure.
No, I think you lost that.
Pretty sure I got stomped in that one. Yes, definitely did. Now I think about it. So that was a fantastic game. There was a lot of movement, some hilarious moments. Both of us sort of hands in the air at different points. Had loads of fun with that one. Cool. I think it was a sneak the win, but it was a win, but only just. And there was so much back and forth. It was brilliant.
Awesome.
Your game 3?
Yeah, I played Yari. Came from Finland. I did say to him at one
Oh
point,
yes.
I said, I was going to ask you what part of Finland you're from before I realised I don't know where anywhere is in Finland. And he went, I'm from the south because everyone's from the south. I was like, yeah, I guessed that much. So, yeah, but no, good fun. I was seriously rusty. Like, I have not played an event of anything as poorly as I played, like tactically, as poorly as I played this event.
Amazing.
So out of touch. And forgetting a few things. And Yari was quite patient with me over a few things in this game, and absolute thanks to him for that. But he bought I can't remember what Legio he was running, but he had an Arcus and a Ferox Maniple, and he chose Salt the Earth. And
Mm-hmm.
I put the token like in the open, right on the edge of my side, and there was some terrain to the right. And then I kind of null deployed on that side,
Mm-hmm.
thinking I've got Archiviz to that and worry about the rest of it. And then one of my issues potentially with the game, not the player at the moment, is he's then set up his Arcus with his Warhounds were both in squadrons, which was quite interesting. So he had 4 Warhounds in 2 squadrons and then 2 other Titans. So
Mm-hmm.
very limited activations. But his Warbringer was just sat behind a building that was like a third of the Warbringer's height, or half of its height, and just sat there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, cool. You're getting all that. You're getting some juicy cover, and I'm getting nothing. Okay, fine, no worries. And he's pushed forwards aggressively with his Warhounds, and I've stepped up the Warlord and just gone bang, take that first Warhound off. Like, I've stripped some shields with it with some other bits, and then I've gone, yeah, boom, that's gone. And I can't remember if it was the explosion from that finished off the other one, but basically 2 of the Warhounds were dead turn 1 on one
Oof.
side. So the Arcus has lost his 2 mates, which is like super cool, and I can really push a Reaver up now because I had to get up near his territory. I
That's a
think.
strong start.
Yeah, strong start, and then the other side, I'm really pounding on one of the Warhounds. They'd split up, and the other one's run around the back of some terrain and stuff. I think we have one of those, more than any other game, AT, because of the low dice. You have those moments where you just don't do anything, or it goes mental. And my aiming up on his other Reaver, not really worrying about his 2 Warhounds so much, like just managing to leave it alive, and
Mm-hmm.
then his Reaver takes out my Reaver. We go through the game. I'm on top. I pretty much table him. The only thing left is his warp bringer because it warp displaced the other side of the building when I went round one side, which I
Amazing.
think, yeah, when I get into warp displacement later. And I didn't line it up very well anyway, but he was left alive, running away from Warlord, Reaver, and a Hound. I think maybe the Hound was still alive. On the other side of things, uh, he dropped his concealment barrage onto Salt the Earth on turn 3, ran into it, interacted with it. I can't do anything at that point then to stop it. Clever tactical play.
Mm.
Have issues with that. And then he's like, oh yeah, and my Reaver had to kill your Reaver, and Warhound had to kill that. So he picked up like max points off me, and I didn't get a huge amount. I butchered him, but
Yeah.
didn't play the scenario anywhere near as well as he did. But it was brutal. It was like, okay, here's where my Legio works. I've taken very little damage turn 1 because Knights have absorbed it. Although, looking around the tables, there were quite a few tables where people might have struggled to take out my Knights quite as quickly as they did on these ones. But all they came
Mm.
up with, all 5 games, were multiple plasma blast guns, fair, but also like Warbringer with 3 templates and
Mm. Mm.
shock weapons and quake weapons and things like that. And it was like,
I was going to
oh,
say, yeah. How
so
many
it
quake
was,
cannons, how
yeah,
many volcano cannons did you face? But yeah. But
enough.
Warbringer's
Like,
going to be one that'll do it. Yeah.
yeah. So, but it was a good fun game. It was good, so yeah, we played the scenario perfectly. Picked up a lot of points off me.
I
But
found that the Team Finland, I mean, amazing that they came out, and it was they'd come over before. I think it was a slightly different team that came over last time, but it was this. Certainly, two of the members were as before, and they played a blinder. I thought they were incredibly well prepared. In other words, I played one of their team in the 5th round, so we'll come to that. But talk about prepared. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, cool.
So my third game. So I'm in a bit of a repeat, sort of the previous year, where I'd played quite aggressively in the first 2 games. I've come out with a win. This time, the second game was a tough one, but I'd managed to get the win there as well. So I'm thinking this is going pretty well. Of course, the way Swiss works means you're then pushed up the rankings, and you're up against other people who have done very well with good reason, rather than somehow lucking their way to that position. And that's where I ran into. That happened at the previous Beachhead, where I ran into one of the team Finland, who absolutely crushed me and schooled me in why a Ferox Maniple double Ferox is dangerous. Which, when you're playing a very aggressive Astorum Regia Maniple, it proves why you shouldn't do that. This time, went up against Simon, aka Badger, as he is, on a couple of social media fronts, particularly the Maximal Fire Discord. Absolute pleasure to play. Couldn't have been nicer. Explained exactly how everything worked, but was one of those group who I would say was playing on a slightly different level. I mean, he was able to calculate and work out things that I know the game reasonably well, but not to that level. He was able to go through things, and he just was out maneuvering and outplaying me. I think I damaged a Titan. It's not fair. I did damage. I think I killed one Warhound over the entire game, and I damaged other things, but I just couldn't focus down on anything. He just outmaneuvered and outplayed me. That didn't go so well. That one I lost things, even with all the durability of the Astorum Regia thing. He was just with his he was also playing. So it was the second Regia I was playing of the weekend. This time an Ignatum one with some very cool combination re-rolls and things, where you can get re-roll 1s and within 12 inches and things. And I certainly wasn't playing cautiously to try and negate some of those abilities. I sort of just played into it, just played the way I would normally.
Sure.
And that did not go well. I lost a Warhound early on, or possibly 2. He was neutering the ability of my warlords to do things, playing very clever concealment barrages, moving things, getting things out of arc. So even with long retreat, I wasn't able to do things in the right way. And like, okay, he's leaving me with very few options. I'd say he effectively had the game's initiative throughout. Yeah, superb. And he went on to do very well. And he was a great game, very enjoyable. But wow, I was getting some lessons there for sure. The fatigue was starting to kick in a little bit at that point.
Right.
I find those. I mean, you said before you've been to tournaments and done far more games, and that's just what tournaments are. But yeah, the third game on the Saturday, I started to feel it a bit. And you're like, Chris played a blinder. Simon played a blinder.
Okay.
Chris did too the day before.
Cool.
Then there was socials in the evening, which was great.
Yeah.
Off out, and some of us out a little bit later than they should have been.
That's all good.
And then we came into Sunday, game 4.
Yeah, game 4. I played Michael Lester. So you played him the year before.
I did indeed.
Wonderful gent. We'd been in the pub chatting the night before. Got drawn up against each other. And this was the 4 corners deployment zone. So your force was going to be split if you couldn't fit it all in one deployment zone. And I put my first Reaver down and then went, oh, that was a mistake. And then he put his first Reaver down. And as I'm putting another, he's on, I've mucked up. So we both mucked up on the same side. I was like, amazing. Okay, I think I might have blocked my Warlord in a little bit here. But essentially it came down to his, did he have a Warlord? No, I can't remember if he had a Warlord as an additional out of his Maniple. Can't remember what Maniple he had. I think he was playing Legio Crucius. Anyway.
Yes, he played Crucius the year before.
That's right. And his Reaver was his Princeps. His Reaver was right at the front of his deployment zone. And I was like, oh, good, it's on the right side, because my Reaver's target was to kill that Reaver. And I thought, and there's a Reaver behind it with a Void Missile. I was like, okay. So I'm going to kill these 2 Reavers and really reduce his ability to hurt me. So my Warhound and some Knights are going to deploy all the way over on my right flank. And my first turn, they're both going to turn 90 degrees and leg it across the table. And his Warlord with 24-inch range guns is going to be left with 0 targets to fire at. And that side of things worked perfectly. I was like, deal with the left flank, turn to the right flank, perfect. And where you get into that tactical kind of, you're going to have to move one of those 2 things I want you to move soon. As I'm holding off, and that is good. One good thing turn 1 with the Dominus is you do have I had 7 activations, so could draw some out.
That is good. That is good. Yeah,
it does help. No, I had 6 activations. Either way, anyway, and I moved my Knights up in preparation for my Warlord, and got it wrong. Moved the Knights up to a point where he could then angle his Void Missile so that he couldn't see any Knights, so that I couldn't transfer hits across, couldn't get the -1 save, all that kind of stuff. So I was like, oh no, Void Missile, this could be onto my Warlord turn 1. Who knows? I feel like I'm in control on the battlefield, but Void Missile can change everything. And it scattered a smidge, and it hit, and it did very little damage. I got away with it. But then it was just, the other thing he did do is he put it in a place where it was near my objective that I had to hold. So and it never really moved off that objective, to the point where I had to kind of move away from it for half the game, which hindered me a lot. He absolutely chose the right shot on that kind of thing, but I absolutely obliterated that flank because my Warlord opened up on his Reaver, and then my Reaver, whose target was that Reaver, then just melted it. And then the Void Missile guy then is pretty much by himself with not enough guns to strip shields and that kind of thing. And I can swing my Warlord round. That's right. I think we ended up the game with our 2 Warlords facing off halfway across the table at each other, and he had no chance of killing me, really. I had a very outside chance of killing him, but yeah, it wasn't going to happen in the end. But I snuck the win on that one.
That's a good opponent to draw in for the Sunday morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Good fun game. Well, I feel like we both made mistakes that even that out, and then bless Michael, very gracious. It was like, you totally outplayed me with the withdrawn flank, which is something I love to do if you can get away with it. And I probably wouldn't have been able to do it if it wasn't for that deployment map. Whether that deployment map's, it is what it is. It's it hurts. It can hurt some.
That was
did it affect you?
Very, very effectively done against me. Because yes, as you say, we were obviously, the way the format of the weekend was, you had set deployments for the specific game, so everyone was playing the same deployment on game 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes. So first of all, Dan playing him with his Legio Vulturum, the Gore Crows. What were the 2 maniples? I think it was a Ferox and there's something else. I can't remember what the second one was. Either way, 2 maniples, lots of Warhounds, a dire wolf across the board. So lots of very, very cool, very chaotic conversions with the sort of gribbly Tyranid bits in there. They look fabulous. I'd seen them from the previous year, but great. First time playing Dan. He was very gracious straight away because we had a slightly delayed start while I had to go and rouse our teammate after he had gone AWOL in the evening, evening before. But so Dan was very gracious to be considerate of that late start. But we got into it, and another pretty heavy beatdown for me, and that one because he did sort of what you're talking about, but to one more extreme. I don't think it was his maniple. I think it was a Legio trait. Either way, there was a special rule that allowed him to redeploy the things he had put on one side.
I think it's a
I can't remember if that's the Vulturum thing. It's a Princeps trait. Yeah. So suddenly he'd gone into refused flank where he had everything on one side, and I had a Warlord and and he was doing Salt the Earth, so I had protected the objective he was going for with a Warlord and a Warhound, but those two were effectively neutered for certainly the first turn of the game. The Warlord.
Right.
Fortunately, it was the ranged Warlord, so at least I could use the Apocalypse missiles, and I think I tried a few shots into a couple of knights he had, but it wasn't a lot. It certainly wasn't particularly effective. So he played that extremely well. He didn't even have to do maneuvering. It was just straight away a redeployment. And I should have anticipated that, or otherwise I'm not sure I'd have done it differently, because I've still had to protect against his rush on Salt the Earth, and he had knights there which could have really dashed for it, but still it was pretty effective. That was also the game where I learned to be respectful of the Ursa's Claws, as his other guys ran it, and he just played a blind. He played a really good combination of stratagems. He managed to quite significantly reduce the firepower coming out of my Warlord, playing blind barrage and using the terrain quite effectively, and presenting different targets. Managed to take out a couple. I think I did 2, 3 of the Warhounds by the end of it. Actually, there was even more by the end of it there. But he really did start picking things apart, and because I was keeping things together for sharing shields, when one Warhound goes, that's another one quite severely damaged. But you roll badly, which I did. The Warlord's suffering, and then he's starting to go out of arc because the claws are coming in. You're like, okay, this is get it. In terms of the actual engines lost and the sort of end of state, he did take out all of my engines in the end. I think he did table me. I managed to at least destroy some of his, and he did well with the points. I managed to get a couple points. So it was a relatively narrow win, which at the very end of it, I thought, damn, I think he shouldn't have been able to claim. I think I would have kept him out of range. I think you had to be within 1 inch of the objective to claim Salt the Earth, not the 2 or 3 that he was. But whatever, I didn't at that point. I didn't care. I was quite jaded Sunday morning after again a late night with a few too lonely lemonades. So I was just going to go for it. I was never going to be going for the anything like the tactical. Trying to get up the rankings on the victory points and the generalship. That was never going to be where I was going with it. I was just there having a fun game. He was a great opponent to play. I really enjoyed it, even though, again, it was just great to see over the weekend. And this is the beauty of playing these different games, and touching on our point in our last conversation about terrain. It was cool to see different terrains and have different environments to play over with different units that I would have never previously seen or played with.
Yeah.
So yeah, another a fairly resounding loss in game 4 for me, sadly.
Cool. Bless. Yeah, the game 5, I've played Sam and his Volpa, and this might have been the really nicely painted army actually, but I had I thought screw it. My missions went. It's been a while, as I say, playing these missions, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try and get some dude within the edge of the table edge at the end of the game. I might be able to do it with some knights. You never know. And he chose to keep me away from his table edge. And again, he had Ferox Maniple with some knights, including some of the little dudes. And I felt, no, I made some big mistakes, but I also played some good game. I put pressure on his Princeps. We both had Dominant Strategist as our Princeps traits, of which I'd used mine once, I think, in the 4 previous games. And I opened up with my Warlord onto his Reaver Princeps and absolutely pounded him. To which his reply was to drop a concealment barrage between the two, with some terrain on the side of it. I was like, fine, that's not a problem. If I can take out his Princeps, then I don't have to worry about. I've got my Dominant Strategist and he can't stop it. So, I'll keep pounding on that. So, put out the old long retreat, shift 6 inches sideways around the other side of the building and go, can still see you, mate. And blew him off the table in the next turn. I was like, okay, played that well. Yeah, done that well. Put pressure on this Warhound over there, and cool. But my word, this game. Well, on the other side though, before that, his what are the little knights called again? I mentioned them.
Armigers,
yes.
or Helverins, yeah.
Warp displacement.
Or Moirax or whatever.
Yeah, warp displacement, only 4 inches, but enough to then get a charge off on a Reaver around the side or whatever it was, and
no.
it's just like, I didn't play it well, but then how do you defend against that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then so they took out a Reaver, then they took out my Warlord in the end. And
Oh
that's
my
right. And
God.
he had some outflanking knights on the other side as well, putting pressure on. Which I kind of went, oh, they're coming on that end. Awesome. I will move my Warhound 12 inches the other direction and just not be near that edge. But yeah, the Armigers ended up taking out the Warlord because I didn't have maneuverability to turn around. Once my knights are dead, I'm losing the activations, so I can't. I can't. Even if I had the maneuverability, I can't. I can't get round to do anything to them. So it becomes almost impossible, which is fine. I didn't play it well. He played that aspect of it very well. But from the first, I think in the first 2 turns, he might have shot 3 Vulcan Megabolts. Certainly his first 3 Vulcan Megabolter shots, each one did 3 hits.
Right.
With no modifiers, I don't think.
Wow.
Yeah. To which I've then lost 1 or 2 shields on each of them.
Mm-hmm.
To my return fire being either, those games where nothing goes right. Like we were both doing it.
Right.
So my shots back were terrible and his saves were terrible. So we were doing damage to each other because we were both useless. But the problem is when you're firing a Warlord at a smaller Titan, you can't afford that. Like when you're firing Warhounds at bigger Titans, you can afford that a little bit more. But all game dice were terrible. Like I made 3 repair rolls. It's one of the few games I remembered when I take critical damage, I can use my once a game ability to make a repair roll with +1.
Oh, that's
Awesome.
good.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
1, 2, 2. The next turn, when I get to the damage control phase with 3 dice, it was 1, 1, 2. And then the next turn, because I'm somehow made it to the next damage control phase, I rolled a 1, 2, 2 again.
Oh
Like
my
3
God.
repair rolls in a row with not even one bit of plasma
Not even a
vented.
shield.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not even a plasma vent. Yeah. Wow.
Warhound on the other side, and I forgot to say, like games 1, 2, and 3. Every time my conversion beam was fired from my Warhound, it was double heat. Like this one was like a Warhound running around with no shields for half the game. But I eventually got him. That one little lone Warhound ran away from all the other knights. The Warlord blows up and goes, "I'm by the edge of your terrain, baby, at the edge of your table. That's 25 points to me. Boosh!"
Nice.
And then we've handed in the form. And then, oh no, I filled out the form. They gone, Greg, is that Warhound on orange? I'm like, oh, yes. And he's also on his 3rd point of critical on the body.
Oh
Oh,
no.
let's roll the dice. D3 hits. Yeah, he's dead. I'm not even rolling. I'm taking him off. Okay,
Bang.
so I lose that 25 points. He goes, and I get the 25 points for you having no one within 8 of my zone. It was like,
What a swing.
yeah. So we filled it out. And it got put in wrong because I think I got given the win on that one when I didn't get it. And I didn't notice till the results came in. Sam, but yeah, it was a. I think we might have both given each other best sports on that game because it was one of those like he was like I'm like, oh man, your dice are terrible, and then I'd fire something and be like, wow, ha, I I don't even know what to say on this, but but yeah, it was crazy, but yeah,
my
Armagus,
my
oh
second game, I felt for Chris because I was having some very good luck with my dice. The amount of
right,
saves I was making and things, it just seemed to be that was a very much a positive. So I didn't ever think I had any particularly bad luck dice wise over the weekend. In like training games, I did. I was to the point where I was thinking I need to ditch these Sun Furies because they're just not reliable
oh
enough.
yeah,
I'm rolling ones with them all the time. This is crazy. I need to mix this up a little bit. I didn't. I thought that's just a silly way of thinking. It's too small a sample size.
if you
But
roll
yeah,
ones with anything, it doesn't matter.
yeah, yeah, like exactly. So I thought, well, okay, this is just as silly. But I didn't have too much of that. However, my fifth game opponent, Marnix, from the team from Finland. He had horrendous luck with his dice. He was playing an Exterminus maniple with the Fire Lords, which you don't tend to see very often.
Nope.
But they looked amazing, really grimy, grim dark style thing. The three warlords and the one cheeky warhound with them. And he got very unlucky. We just did this great stand-up game. It was that diagonal deployment. And he had the ability to take out two pieces of terrain as one of his the Fire Master's stratagems, which you can buy multiple times. So it's called Scorched Earth or something. You can just burn a piece of terrain with it, which was very cool. I've not come across that before. I'd never played against an Exterminus maniple before. I'd never played against Fire Masters. Oh, that's not true. I have played against Fire Masters. Our teammate has them, but not really played against them significantly. He was so unlucky. The amount of heat he was rolling, because with Exterminus, obviously, he was pushing heat quite a lot and taking additional heat to get the extra strength on the weapons. Great. But whenever he was rolling, he seemed to be taking heat, and just lots of dice rolls didn't go his way. Repair rolls didn't go his way. Lots of things. Focused in, killed one of the warlords fairly early on with basically the whole maniple firing at it. Advanced as a line, sharing the shields across. Kind of did okay. One of the warhounds took a bit of a kicking, but nothing too major, which is surprising against an Exterminus running at an Exterminus as it was. Gives an indication of where the luck was falling. I think I did lose one warhound, or did I? No, I'm not sure I did actually, even at that point early in the game. Took out one of his warlords. Suddenly you're thinking, okay, this is the pressure's coming off a little bit here. Still a slightly scary long range one on the back. Turn all attentions to the next one. Really hammer in on his other warlord, which is his Princeps. The Princeps trait that they've got, I think it's again a Fire Master's specific trait. The Princeps Senioris trait was the Butcher. I think it was World Butcher or something like that. It was where if he uses it, he can issue that as a command effectively, but not by rolling a dice. He just gets it in the strategy phase, so it basically doesn't issue an order to his Titan. He can reroll ones. So that was pretty good on there. But again, focused in on that, nearly killed this warlord in that second round. Didn't quite manage it. It was crippled. It had like 1 point of damage left on one of its tracks, and pretty evenly damaged across there with one warlord and warhound getting around the flank of it. The other three sort of facing them down. One of which was quite badly damaged and quaked into oblivion, but looking pretty good for the third round. He then goes for the slightly bold move, which was just the most hilarious move. It's particularly game 5. Fatigue's really kicking in at this point. He plays Warp Displacement. Warp displaces his warlord straight over, turns it into essentially a warp battering ram, slams the warlord. His warp displaces into my warlord and warhound that were closing in on its flank, slams into them. Doesn't do too much to my warlord. The warhound, however, kills it outright. It detonates, destroys the other warhound beside it. Suddenly the game's looking rather different. I've got a warlord that's taken a bit of damage at least. I've got another warlord and a badly damaged warhound on the other side, and 2 warhounds have just blown up. Right, okay. He loses his warlord very much so in the ensuing fire that comes out of it. So he's just left with one warlord that's taken a bit of damage at his back quarter, with 2 warlords facing it down, which are repairing pretty well. But his other warhound, with 2 Vulcans on it, has chosen, actually, I'm going to keep myself out of this after taking a few pot shots into the back of some things, then ran off just to be able to claim the objective, because he was just in my back 12 inches. And right, I'm just going to give up on objectives. I'm not going to bother to have that. So he did win the game because of having that. Had I had something that could have looped around, maybe if those 2 warhounds hadn't been killed and I'd gone after it, that might have been a bit different. But I don't think I destroyed the last warlord, but it was in a bad way at the end of the game. I nearly killed all 3 warlords. Maybe I did kill all 3, I can't remember now, but it was close to that. But he certainly played objectives well, played his stratagems really well. Really fun game, despite horrendous luck. I mean, the heat he was packing on those warlords was crazy. Pushing generator, and even then, even when he was in the red and things, actually the damage he was taking wasn't too bad. But yeah, it seems kind of appropriate for Fire Masters running super hot as they were. So yeah, great round of 5 games, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
by the Sunday, the end of the day, you kind of running on fumes a bit. Then certainly we were looking at like, we've got quite a long, slow train journey here, and then got to get back across London once you've got back into London. Starting to think, kind of need to wrap this up here, but it was still a fairly relaxed end to the day. I thought managed to get around and see some of the things.
Cracking playing the game again. I say playing it more, learning the basic objectives like better. That kind of playing them out, looking at some of the other aspects of the game, kind of a little bit more, and I'd felt I'd have played better games for sure. But it was just great to get the game back in. Now I've got to try and say hook some people in at the club. Maybe maybe I do have to paint up some more Titans in a different Legio or something, or maybe I need to buy a. Oh, I haven't got any money. That's so sad. I'll have to. I'm gonna have to sell something and buy a pre-made Legio just so that people can borrow something. Maybe try and get them in because I do want to play it more because it has some fantastic moments. I just want to bring up before we get into the event running, and we're going to wrap this section up relatively soon. Interaction with objectives. Concealment barrage. I have an issue with this. Concealment barrage. You cannot be seen. If two people are touching bases in a concealment barrage, they cannot interact. You can do nothing. You can fire blind into there. Fine, cool. That means you can't see. Why are you allowed to interact with objectives if you're in a concealment barrage? I think it's wrong. I think it's a negative play experience because of
when it's as clear cut as you're touching another Titan and you can't shoot it.
Yeah,
that does it. Because if you said, "Oh, it's salt the earth," I should just be able to just destroy the ground. Well, yeah, but that would be true if you were touching a Titan. You're
you're running into pitch darkness, effectively. Right? That's what it's saying. No problem with the guys doing it. It was in the rules. It was a clever use of the rules. If it was me the other way,
it's a problem with the rule. Yeah,
there's a fundamental problem with the rule. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Because a good player can keep, a warhound fairly well hidden. I could have deployed differently, and I could have done lots of different things to make sure that was harder to do. Absolutely, hold my own fault for this and again, not playing the game enough. But a good player in cover, in more cover. Oh, can't be seen. 25 points. Thank you very much. One warhound.
Yeah,
that's not cool, bro. That's not cool. In my opinion, that's something that probably needs to be considered.
Yeah, it's just it's even more evidence for, or even more of a case rather for, could do with the Titanicus 2.0.
Yeah, it's just another straw on that. How often did you use your loyalist bonus to change an order?
Once, I think.
Cool. The amount of times I would use it if I don't necessarily want to be on orders a lot.
No, I tend not to use them.
And you can't use it on emergency repair.
No.
So that's the one that I will be on more than the others. So
I tend to
use
split fire a chunk because I haven't used it in the past and regretted it. So if I was in doubt, I'd tend to go with that, assuming I was in a position that I wanted to be in. And then it could have been quite handy. I had used it there. I think, I did have I tend to, it's the sort of thing I would forget. There's a few little things, particularly in Titanicus, I would tend to forget. Ardex defensor cannons, I tend to forget that they exist.
Yeah, no, I remember them this game.
The loyalist, it used to share the loyalist trait. Even little rules like that, I think, are quite handy. You should say once per game abilities or Legio traits and things are quite handy to have. It was cheat sheets for.
It was more that, and before we do that, in that game against Sam, I did manage to kill I had one knight with a Gatling cannon killer warhound, which is just people are like, you taking the ones that can't hurt shields? I'm like, yep. I mean, they're going to die anyway. But yeah, to have a strength 3 weapon destroy a Titan is always glorious as far as I'm concerned. What I mean is, so the loyalist one, I mean, it's cool. and maybe I should be looking at okay, let's try split fire, and then I can, if I need to change things as I go through, I can, or what have you. But there are restrictions around the movement and stuff like that, which I didn't really want at any point. So it became hard for me to utilize it in any way, shape, or form. In terms of your stratagems, so I took the Titan Hunter infantry a number of times, and it's one of those ones where I want it to be good, and every now and then it's going to be good, and I really don't think it's that good.
I've used it in games a long time ago, and I quite enjoyed using it without having used it against me. And it's quite fun as a little irritation kind of thing. It's not out and out good though. I don't think really. There are stratagems that are warp displacement, chief among them. I would say seems to be extremely effective. But I wouldn't say that. I mean, I didn't miss the one I was agonising over was Vox Blackout. That was
Yeah.
used once against me. It was reasonable, but it wasn't game changing in any stretch. And I didn't miss it. I didn't miss. I didn't think that would have been really handy to have. Long Retreat is brilliant. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, Long Retreat's really cool. I don't think Vox Blackout's a major thing. I think it's a good defense against specific styles of play. Potentially, you're getting to the point of rock paper scissors at that point, though. So that can be a little bit funky. How many points is warp displacement? Is it 2?
Must be. If it's 1, it's broken. If it's 1, that's outrageous.
I think there could be 3, and it's because it's not about the average use of it, right? That's not the problem. What you get to is a good player or a player with a set kind of thing and a good use of terrain, and it becomes you can't. Particularly with, I'll tell you what it is. It's particularly with the nature of the objectives, where you are having to move up the table for a lot of them, and for secondaries as well potentially. That you're opening up flanks and rears much more, and then I have to push up the table. Therefore, when you've got a stratagem that can be played anywhere across the board, it's not restricted in any way, which isn't not saying it should be restricted, but it can be jumped on the left flank or the right flank. You've got to be thinking about it all the time, and you've got to be thinking about a massive variable, and 7 inches, an average roll, or even less than average roll, can move you across a building which can be higher than your Reaver is. Is how do you play against that to a point without unless you just remove the range between you and the enemy, which lessens the effect of it.
Particularly the fact that the movement is in any direction. It messes with firing arcs so much, where movement is so critical in the game.
Yeah, the other thing is, and no one did it this way, but it's not on activation.
No, so agreed.
You don't have to. I think at the very least, it should be when activating this model. You can then do that, because the ability to move something out of kind of turn and then later come back to it is
an ability to warp displace away from a charge, for example.
Yeah, and then not have to activate that one. I can warp displace this one away and then shoot you with this one. It's like no, you should lose the opportunity to shoot first with the Titan you want to shoot first with. Yeah, so definitely that to at least bring it down to a fair value.
It's just very effective, isn't it? It's extremely effective.
I think it's just, and again, as I say, a lot of the time it's a cool thing when a really good player gets hold of it, and maybe really good players can defend against it better than I can. But I think there's so much scope for it to be useful for that, as I say, particularly when you have to move up the table in so many of the missions. Yeah, saving you from all kinds of sticky situations. I could play my movement really well, and then you could just go, oh, warp displacement 10 inches. Okay, cool. Oh, well, what can I do about that? That warlord's gone. That could only move 6 inches has gone 10 inches. You can't plan for that.
I can see the thinking that the random nature of it is a counterbalancing aspect to it. I'm not sure it's enough of a counterbalance. I haven't found. I mean, it was used twice against me in the games, and it was used. It wasn't in any way a game-breaking way. It was just used very effectively. I mean, it was a huge move that Marnix did in particular, who did swing the game a different direction from the way it was going. But it was so fun and so thematic and so cool. So I haven't got a problem with it per se, but I hear what you're saying. When
in a game,
a very effective player uses it, it's powerful.
In a game where movement is so key, where
Yeah, I agree.
arcs of visibility and weapon arcs and things like that are so important, the ability to move even 5 inches sideways, like there's a reason Corsair does very well at a base level, because it makes things easy to play. I can do what I need to do. Well, Corsair Warp Displacement allows you to do that, and then more basic, because you don't even commit, do you? You just roll the dice, and then like, if you had to choose direction, choose what you want to do, then roll the dice. Then okay, cool. I need to go this way, but I need to roll a 6, otherwise it's bad for me. Wouldn't be such a bad thing. Oh, I've rolled a 5. Oh, in which case, rather than going forwards and round, I'll actually just jump the other side of this terrain as a defensive measure. It's like, well, there's very little negative experience
Agreed.
from that.
I think there's quite a few things that you could do as a tweak to it that would mean it would never be taken. So it would have to be very subtle. You'd have to be very subtle. You would very easily neuter it too much, I think. But I agree. I think you could just do a little tweak, and it would be less of an auto take. I would now struggle, particularly in the Vanipals that I was taking. I would now struggle to not take long retreat. That is such a useful card. That was superb.
I don't think it's a 2-point card. I think there's an argument it's like a 1.3, 1.4. It's a strong 1-point card. Like, but you've still got to, but as a 1-point card, like the times you want to use it are when you're in the middle of things, really want to, or you want to skirt around stuff. So there are times when you're going to use it and you're not using it on as many Titans as you want to be. So there is that aspect to it as well. Like you might play it for 2 Titans out of 5 to be able to do that. Very good ability. Don't get me wrong. But again, you're limiting a warlord to a maximum of 6 inches in any direction, and terrain and all that as well. So it's not like it's wild crazy. It's a good card, much like overcharged cannons.
I was thinking that there's not much downside to that.
Concealment barrage. I say, if you took away the objective thing, it's still useful for people who want to run that Titan up early and have it protected. Still useful for objective play, because you can protect someone completely from it. I was just thinking, like in game 3, it would have been lovely for me to remember my blind barrage, like for 4 turns in a row, that I should have played it on his Warbringer. But hey, that's me. But yeah, I'd have to play. Fundamentally, next event, like the Dominus is going. So Dominus is a great fun maniple. However, every game where someone has 2 Warhounds with plasma on their arms, they go, right, well, fire at the Knights, which is the correct move to do, and I have a problem with plasma blast guns. I think we talked about this, and I kind of off the cuff suggested
you asked
that
a few people, didn't you?
Yeah, maybe if you took it down to 1 shot, but took away the -1 penalty to hit, and maybe just a tweak more on that, you'd still take it, because it's strength 10 on a Warhound, like that can do 2 hits. But the fact that a plasma blast gun fires at my Knights, smidge amount of luck, gets 4 hits, kills 2 out of 3 Lancers with ease, with impunity, and it doesn't take much for that to happen. It happened more than once in game. I think there's an issue with those guns. With that build of Warhound, particularly both of them, points, and or I think the plasma blast gun actually could do with rules tweaks. I think it's so powerful, but you still want to be able to hurt big Titans and things with a Warhound. So again, you can't go too far the other way. But what the Dominus does is it forces people to shoot the Knights, and all it does is buy you 1 1 and a smidge turns of your Titans aren't being shot because they're shooting the Knights. So essentially, you choose your mana pool and you get to use it all the time you have the Titans in the mana pool. They get to do
Oh
their
yes, you
thing.
said this, didn't you? Yeah. Your next
Whereas,
turn, you're going to take something where the
yeah,
rules are effective for more than one turn.
yeah. For most of my games, my mana pool rules, which are completely free rules, which affect the game. Ferox is as soon as he gets in, every turn he's in half range, short range. Boom, I'm better than you. I'm better than you. My Dominus is like, cool, you killed all my knights. My mana pool does a 0. I'm playing without a mana pool.
Yeah,
and that's why it's not chosen. It can be fantastic. It can be a lot of fun, and it has some funky, cool rules. But essentially, after turn 1, shortly after turn 1, start of turn 2 shooting phase, you're playing without a mana pool rule.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with it.
Mm.
Even a poor mana pool, a poorer mana pool that you get to use for 5 turns is probably better.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. It would be lovely to see a way to make it work a bit better, but I don't know how to do that because there's a lot of moving parts in it. Without it being hideous, like, you can't shoot my knights, you have to shoot my titans. Oh, look, all your Vulcan Mega Battle shots have gone into this. Yeah, that would be a terrible way of doing it. It would go far too far the other way. So I completely understand that. So the Dominus probably has to go away, which is a shame.
Yeah.
I think
Well, like you
Procedures
say,
might stay for a little bit. Quite like the Procedures rules.
I would like to give them a go. There's not. Yeah, I think a shooting Legio, I would quite like to give a go, and I think Presages is quite a good one because I like that it's precision over just more firepower, like a defensor or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. You happy with your mana pool?
I am,
You
but
can
I'm
get more out of
slightly
it.
worried. I'm slightly worried. It's just. I would like to play something else because I'm worried I'm just relying on
Sure.
this because it's familiar. Astorum are pretty straightforward. There's nothing tricksy about them, and I'm worried I'm becoming reliant on a lot of the things that are in that mana pool and Legio combo. I think it would be healthy to try out some different things just to experience them, and playing this, playing in that tournament sort of reinforce that. I should have a go with some. I'd like to have a go with an Exterminus. I think that's quite a difficult, quite a tricky thing to play because you make a mistake, you tend to be punished for it.
Yeah.
Same as I'd quite like to play with an all-light mana pool. I've never played a Corsair mana pool. I'd like to play some of the other mana pools and some of the other Legios. I've got a few Titans kicking around in different schemes that I've collected over the years. So I'd quite like to give some of those a go. And I'll be doing that. Unfortunately, as I say, there's a few events coming up. I'm not sure I'll necessarily make it to events, but there's sort of it's rekindled connections with people going to that event, and hopefully I can get out and play some more games, both with people who were at that event who live nearby, fortunately, and some a bit further away, which we could meet up and hopefully play some games.
Yes,
in the not too distant future. So yeah.
So the event itself. So we attended the Maximum Fire team tournament. I was intrigued because there was nothing really in the pack about how that will work, except best team, wins the main trophy, that kind of thing. And the first game, we were told to go and grab an opponent, which so last year you were saying it was team versus team, and then within that team you paired off. How did you pair off last year? Was it?
I was just thinking. I was just trying to anticipate that question, and I can't remember.
Okay.
I've got a feeling we were
team
paired up randomly, but I could be wrong. Maybe we did just grab teams, but certainly your team played another team. Yeah.
Yeah. So in this game, the first game, it was like grab a random opponent. I'm like, okay. I mean, it's a tournament. That's an interesting way of doing it because normally just let the dice roll on that one. But cool. So I went and grabbed Rob, and I was like, cool. So I've immediately turned around and gone, we're playing these guys. To which people have gone, no, I think you just grab one opponent. And I'm like, well, that's curious. My team aren't playing your team. Okay, so maybe we're just using this to settle in. No worries. Game 1 done. Game 2, we're then playing, as far as I could tell, Swiss.
People. Yeah, it was Swiss.
Individual Swiss. And that carried on. So essentially we played a individual tournament that then collated the points together to have the team as the prize system,
Yes.
which is not what I wanted.
It's not what they'd done the year before.
Yeah.
They didn't say they were going to do the same, and it was noticeable in the pack that it was different to the previous year. There was a few tweaks, like the way deployments were set and missions selection and so on. That's fine, but it was quite clear because the previous year it made clear that you, at the beginning of each round, each game, your team had to select an attacker, a skirmisher, and a
Yes.
defender, and then your opposing team, you played your sort of opposite number, if you like, and that depended that then governed which objectives you could choose, etc.
So
so there was we knew that, but we knew it wasn't going to be that.
Yeah,
But
and I can see
it's
why you
absolutely
changed.
fair.
I can absolutely see why you changed. The fact is, to do a proper teams event, you need a team of 3 people as a spare player. You need to. There's a lot more effort involved in a team event than there is. I could run a singles tournament of any kind of game basically tomorrow. Like, find the right program, away you go. It's simple, not a problem at all. Doesn't mean there isn't effort involved, but it's not hard. Team events, say require much more thinking, as you say, a way of people pairing off and what have you. But what team events do is they put you all together. So you have your team that you travel with, that you've maybe friends with, maybe you're bonding with over that weekend. And you're like, "How you doing, mate? How you doing?" And you're like, ideally on tables next to each other, rolling dice. Oh man, that's a terrible result. Okay, do I need to push? Like, we're winning 2 games here. Do we have to worry if we lose one? Is it a major issue? That kind of thing could even play into it. But you have the camaraderie of a team. Now, I think it was Rob was on a made-up team of 3 different guys, and he didn't know the other 2 guys, and he got on with them and he chatted to them. But essentially, he could have just been playing a singles event. And I thought that was disappointing.
I did feel it had lost something.
Yeah,
from the previous. It was exactly that separation from your teammates, other than between rounds, which often could have been quite quick. But playing alongside your teammates was a cool feature. You were checking in with people. How are you doing? How's it going? Oh, like exactly the way you just said. That was there before. Even if you haven't got the mechanic, I think the separating of people, and you can see why it was done. It certainly simplifies the organisation of the whole thing. It might have been a headache to kind of organise it, how to combine the Swiss and then have teams playing each other, but whatever. It did, just looking at it coldly as a participant, it did lose some of that team camaraderie that I thought was valuable.
I wasn't there last year. I've played 6 Nations Warhammer, where I've been part of a team where literally people, how many points do you reckon you're going to get from this game? All that kind of stuff. On the other end of the scale, from individual events. But I wanted to go down there and see, team versus team, 3 shirts the same on one side, like 3 shirts the same on the other side, or what
Which
have you. All that
quite a
kind
few
of
people
stuff.
did that, because there was obviously that encouragement to do that.
Whereas instead, I'm looking up, going, "Oh, where's Howard playing?
Oh, he's
on table 5.
He's the other side of the pole.
Yeah, and my results are having no effect on Howard's results or games or anything like that. That we are completely disconnected from each other until the award ceremony. So I think that's a big shame. Maybe I think if you are going to run that kind of event, I'd rather see a singles event with a team award given out for like the top 3 placings of your club or team or what have you, or split into teams of 3 and 4. But make it a singles event and have a team additional thing on there, because I don't know. I assume they get kept teammates away from each other. I don't really know. I know there's a call out that yeah, so it's a team event, so I shouldn't be able to play you.
Oh, I see. Yes, I did. That never came up. Yes, I don't know how they did that, but yes, you're right.
No,
There was maybe it was a redraw, but yeah.
I think they had an Excel system, but essentially, tournament programs have it where you have a selector function which just says, no matching in this segment and what have you. Although, because they did say something about, there was one point where they said if you're paired up with somebody you've already played, like, come on, we'll just mix it up a little bit. And I thought, well, I'm not sure that you should have many of those, to be honest, with a half decent tournament software. I can think of when I was using ones having it once or twice in multiple events where that's occurred, but by the by, really, that one. I thought the terrain was quite good, mixed. It was crazy. We talked about it only
Yeah.
a week or so
And
before
then there
going
was an
down. But
immediate example of it. Yeah.
it was really nice to
I
have a
thought it was.
look
I thought it was
at
really good. I thought the
terrain.
terrain looked excellent. I thought
Mm.
every table had a theme. There was variety, but not massive swings. You didn't go to one and you're like, oh my god, this is such a dense terrain. This is going to be impossible to move around. There was. I thought they got that bang on. I thought it was a really good mix. It looked great and it played well, but was different.
Yeah.
Entirely supporting your point last time and proved it perfectly. I thought. But
Uh,
it's a lot of fun to do it that way.
yeah, there were definitely games where I felt like, this is helping me, or this is all this. I'm gonna have to like utilize this as well as I can to get the most out of it, kind of thing.
Mm.
Were there any other aspects of the actual event itself? The timings on the Sunday, we ended up having well, how long was the break? An hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes, or something
I
like
think it was
that.
an hour and a half. Yeah, it was quite long.
It was a long break on the Sunday between games. Now, I had to get back to my boys. I left Friday after. Well, I dropped my boy off on the Friday morning, and I wanted to get back in time to put him to bed. Which, when I kind of looked down, two games on the Sunday. I didn't really look at the times. Two games, 2 hours. Yeah, well, cool. We'll be well away. And I looked at it. I was like, "There's an hour and a half break here," and I finished my game only 10 or 15 minutes earlier than that, but it's best part of 2 hours break. I was
Mm.
like, oh, well, what do I do? This is like 45 minutes usually is fine. I appreciate there's an element of wanting people to be able to look around the event and the sales stands and all that.
I was going to make that point, yeah, because I think that is a thing. You would want to be able
Uh,
to do that. Would that be better on the Saturday? But then you've got a trouble of 3 games on the Saturday. Yeah,
I just think
that's a tricky balance there.
I think if you really want to do that, you play the game like you play the game time in a timely manner, and you still have enough time to go
Mm,
and do those kind of things. It was too long, in my opinion. Other people
mm,
may disagree, but Rob particularly had to get back to the northwest.
mm,
5-hour drive. Like, it's amazing how much an extra hour can give you on that. I did. I literally got back 5 minutes before my missus did, and we were putting the boy to bed like 20 minutes later,
mm.
um, which meant a lot. I only ducked out on the events because I ducked out when they started to set up because we still hadn't. Yeah, they were setting up the Titans on the big table, and I was
Yeah,
like, oh my word! Like we were 10 minutes away from when the awards were supposed to be done, and I'm like, I haven't even started putting Titans on a table. I think they'd only just selected which table to put the Titans on. And I was like, no, I'm gone. All my stuff was already in the car by that point. I was
yeah.
like, I'm going to shoot here. Which maybe I'm the outlier on that. Maybe people
I
prefer
don't
that.
think there was.
I
I
do
don't think
it.
there was many. I think it was only a couple of people who. But I can understand people. I mean, we considered it, and I considered thinking, oh, it's an hour between every train. It's quite a long
Right,
train journey. And then once you're back in, it was getting on for a 3 hour train journey on the Sunday, and
sure.
then you had another hour on top of that to get home from there, and it's starting to stretch out. If you can't, the earliest train you can get is the 6 or 7 o'clock train. You know, there's no chance of me getting back in time to see
And
to put the little one to bed. But it was so at that point we thought, okay, well on that basis we might as well be part of this. But it becomes a consideration, yeah.
yeah,
But
and
I
there's
think you're right. I think most people had sort of gone right. I'm here for the whole thing, but which is
yeah,
fine.
yeah. It's maybe something I think about next time. Like the Blood Bowl was gone. Like,
Mm.
they
Yeah,
were out of there. When the only other thing, and I'm on the outside looking. I don't know how the event was run, that kind of thing. There were quite a few people involved with running the event, which is really cool. It allows you to spare play. You can maybe mix it up. data input, all that. But at one point, there was like 6 people around that table who were linked to Maximal Fire in some way, shape, or form. Whatever you've got to do, I feel they had enough people to do it all. And again, this might not be fair. This is this is outside looking in, but it felt like cool. That table could have been highlighted where you're doing those titans right from the first moment. Like cool. By the way, guys, when you finish, this is the table. Crack on, crack on, crack on. You can reduce that whole time scale in that. And there was an issue caused by Ant, who had a rather fruitful, eventful night
Yes,
out.
he did. Yeah,
Who
he
missed?
went a bit bigger than he intended
Yeah,
to,
and it happens at
and
events.
paid the price. Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
not going to comment on that. I have my views on that, but I don't drink as well, so it is what it is. But at one point, I can't remember the lady's name next to me. Emily, maybe
I
it
want to
could
say
be
Emily. Yeah, Emily or
something
Emma.
like that.
I forget. Yeah.
One of the two. Yeah, I think it was her. Was due to play him, and it was, there seemed a bit of confusion as to whether we just had to wait for him to turn up. So I kind of volunteered to step out, but eventually I think the spare player dropped to even up the teams, which felt a
I think
little
that
like
was partly. I think that was partly to do with there was uncertainty whether he was
he would
going to
turn up
be,
or not,
turn up and
and that's
be a bit late or quite a
yeah,
bit late, or
and
whether
that's why
it was
kind
just
of I offered
rule it. Yeah, or
potentially to
whether it was
drop
going to be
out.
no, he's not going to make it. You kind of need that now. Either that's something
I also
a
think
TO's either got to call that,
you've got
or
to call that.
you've got to say unless you're here in the first 15 minutes, then it done. But
I
it was billed as being a more relaxed start on the Sunday. So
but
exactly, I can see the confusion over that.
I still think you even with the relaxing, you've got to put in there that if
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
25 minutes late, right,
yeah. It's not fair on
tough.
the others. Yeah, I agree with that.
You're
Yeah,
sitting out
yeah,
because
yeah.
that person's paid to play 5 games because you can't turn up for whatever reason. It could be very genuine, like oh,
Yeah,
this happened and blah blah blah. Cool. You've just got to accept that life's happened bad to you, but why should your opponent then be forced to suffer
absolutely
for
fair.
that?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it got handled in the end. So but
Mm,
it was a little bit of like around that. I think you need to make that. I think it would be worth having that in the pack so you can have that backup of like, well, it was in the pack. Cool. Sorry, Emily, can you wait 20 minutes? If no one's here 20 minutes, come to me. We'll sort this out. What have you. And that's why, because there was a little bit of uncertainty, that's why I was like, you know what? Cool, it doesn't matter. Whatever,
mm, mm.
I've played enough games over my life that if I have to step out for someone else to play, crack on. But it got resolved in the end, which is what you want.
Mm.
But yeah, painting was good. There was the winner
Oh
had a
yeah,
lovely display piece.
Sarah. Yeah, so Sarah Oliver.
Yes.
She's done some incredible hobby before taking incredible. She really went to town with a display board. Um, that
Who did you vote
her
for?
I
As
voted for her.
paint for her. So what was interesting was there were some very good paint jobs across the thing. Not disparaging anyone's paint jobs at all. I think her display was the best.
Yes, agreed.
Uh, I think there were better painted Legios from my limited paint knowledge. I think I was. I don't know. I don't know whether sometimes there's that unconscious bias and you don't know. I think I actually voted for Grant in the end. Who
You
wasn't?
mentioned to me that you were thinking about it.
Yeah, who wasn't in the top lot, and I was a little bit surprised. I felt that maybe, and it's really hard. What do you judge best painted on?
Yeah,
And this is
yeah.
why I never have best painted
And
because
do you make it a group vote, or do you make it a
yeah,
judged thing?
yeah, and that was they had one round of voting and then a narrowed choice,
Mm.
um, and Grant never made it to the narrow choice. Uh, uh, and there were Legios there that were well painted, but I didn't necessarily think fit the 40k background quite
Mm.
as well. Like there were some stunning armies there that I was like, I don't really get doesn't shout 40k at me.
No, and that's the difference between it being sort of say a Games Workshop event,
Hmm.
where obviously Gold Demon's a whole other conversation entirely,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
that's quite clear that if it's not representative of the law, it's not going to go through. That is obviously not the case at an independent event. They can do what they like.
Yeah,
but as you
absolutely.
say, there's some things that appeals to some people because it was there were examples of extremely impressive skills on show,
Yeah.
but something that isn't necessarily very Age of Darkness, 40k, whatever.
Some super
I agree
cool
with you.
ideas as well.
Yeah.
I think and this is why this is me being picky, and sometimes like anyone listening to the show will know that sometimes I'm overly picky, and people go, "Greg, just chill out," and I'm like, "Well, language matters,"
You?
and I go, that little bit further. But I call it best or favorite army or best army because if I came up to 2 Golden Demon paint jobs on Titans and was asked to pick the best paint job, I can't do it.
No.
I can pick the one I like the best.
Yes. Are you pitching it on it's whether or not it's subjective or an objectively best? Yeah,
and I
that's the hard thing.
fundamentally think that it came down to best looking army, because there's no doubt that Sarah's was striking and it was really well done with the board and everything else like that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Grant's army last time I thought was of a similar caliber. He took a Krytos Legio last time. He spent a lot of time working them up, and he's got an amazing display board with loads of in scale Marines. Like he's got basically Krytos with an Iron Warriors force breaking through a wall defended by Imperial Fists. It looks incredible, a bit like Sarah's was with the Ultramarines epic models on them. Cool, but it's just a different year.
Yeah. And I think his, and not just his, I was just picking his out because I know
there was loads. Simon's was amazing. Chris's were amazing. There was loads of them.
His was subtle, which doesn't always grab the eye. Like it was when I looked at it, I was like, "That's really well done." I looked at it and thought, actually, that is one of the better paint jobs here. And there was a really cool guy whose painting wasn't the top 2 or 3 or whatever, but had a really nice managed to get texture onto the models in such a way and things like that, which all add up. And yeah, I think it was cool. I wasn't blown away like sometimes you can be. Maybe that's me being just around too many good painters in what I'm doing. But it was good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not again. This is not a negative comment about the quality of paint.
The standard was consistently high, as it often is at events, because people put in effort when they're going to an event, and then and Greg was there too. That's not fair. That's not fair. Your knights in particular, I think, look great. And you've got things you want to do. I think they look great.
Painted between the lines is unbelievable.
That's the thing. That's the thing. But, Grant's, if anyone wants to check him out, Grant is Diadrin on Instagram, and I agree with you. His take on Legio Metallicon, Diredrin, I think Diadrin. He lives just up the road from me. He's a regular opponent of mine, and he has done a fantastic take on Legio Metallica, the Iron Skulls. He's got a lovely Angron clear red over a metallic base. You get this sort of orange red look, which looks amazing, and then obviously the iron faces on these guys. It just looks they look really cool. I would recommend you taking a look. He had a really interesting maniple as well, the maniple that allows the Reaver to fire for free.
Yes,
once the war Venator, that's it. And he took that.
We'll talk about this on another show because we need to do more. We're already half an hour beyond our allotted time for this recording session, and we will add that onto another show unless there's anything really quick you want to bring up about.
No, I could roll on forever, as I was the one who tried to instigate a time limit, and then I'm the one pushing past.
Well, so you and me
entirely fitting, isn't it?
But,
entirely. No, I think that covers.
So, are you going? Are you going next year?
Very likely to.
So I might not.
Costs are a thing.
Sharing rooms would be a better idea.
Events are expensive.
They are when you travel.
Yeah, exactly. With travel and accommodation and the cost of the event starts to add up pretty quickly. And which I have reminded myself. And then you're eating out and you're drinking and it skyrockets pretty quickly. Assuming that can balance out okay, I would like to go again because I really enjoy the overall event and I like the people that are there a lot. I think it's a really good fun.
Great quick round
event.
This Howard. Great quick roundup. Okay, so I will probably go to Beachhead again. I could play Heresy. I could play Age of Sigmar with a lot of some old friends. I could play Blood Bowl quite happily. I could play AT. So maybe let's see where I feel. The advantage for AT is there are fewer AT events going on, so it's more of a draw to do it there. And maybe next time we actually do just share a room, like
That helps bring
take
down
some
costs.
earplugs, man.
Yeah.
Take some earplugs, and you'll be fine. Cool. Right, let's leave this section here, and we'll come back and talk some books. Here's future Greg giving you a little bit of an addendum to our Beachhead review. I just wanted to make clear, basically, when we were recording this, Howard and I were both quite tired, and we were trying to be as honest as we can within the discussion, and and part of that is being hopefully constructively critical. And I say I hope that comes across. We've got kind of similar issues in some ways with the end and the death review aspect of this podcast. Ultimately, we both want to make sure that people know we really enjoyed the event, and we are both looking at Beachhead next year. As Howard said, he was definitely down for AT. The only reason I'm potentially not down for AT is that we have other options. There's Blood Bowl, there's Heresy, there's potentially even 40k. The guys, I know the Maximal Fire guys have talked about Legions Imperialis potentially. There's games I play going on, so I would like to attend. I think the event in itself was good, as in Beachhead was good, and then the AT event was good as well. So it's definitely not written off the list or anything like that. We did enjoy the event. I just wanted to make absolutely sure that came across. Many thanks. Well, here we are, the end of the Horus Heresy novel series, but not necessarily books set in the Horus Heresy. We kind of fell off, didn't we? We never got around to Warhawk and all that, but it feels like we have to kind of handle this final book.
Yeah. I mean, even just hearing you say it like that, actually, it almost caught me unawares. It's a big moment, really, isn't it? And I think
massive.
people have reflected on that. I think it's hit a lot of people. There's suddenly, oh wow, this is happened. This is the end of this. At the end of this phase, at least, the end of this arc. Yeah. It is a big deal.
It's interesting. What's interesting to me really is the amount of people who've not finished the book, like how staggered the finishing of the book is. Like, it wasn't quite as like everyone rushing to finish it at the same time like it's been before, and I don't know why. I don't know whether it's because it's the end of such a long series or because maybe they've heard stuff beforehand. Like, I don't know. I don't think I'll ever kind of get an answer from anyone about that. But there were people I thought, oh, you've only just finished reading it and it was out a while ago.
I felt that a little bit with all of the Siege books, to be honest. I didn't feel quite the rush that I remember there being the case with some of the other novels, which is sort of surprising in many ways. But now you say that,
I wonder if there's an element of fatigue, maybe, and also potentially that there weren't, the final bit of the final book weren't as many surprises as some people were thinking there were going to be. So maybe people heard that and thought, well, I know the story. I don't know, but
yeah, and potentially just because of, I mean, particularly with the end of it being, I heard a few people sort of struggle with the length of the final act, the final arc 3 was going to be, which we'll touch on, of course.
Yeah, so maybe one or two of the previous two books, part 1 and 2, contributing to that. Should we start there? So the afterword by Dan talks about it being a single book split into 3 parts, but it's released as 3 books. We're gonna talk about it in general as one book. Although I think most of what we're going to talk about will be the end of the second book and the third book because of the nature of what's been put into those sections as being weighted that way.
Yes, and I think that afterward was particularly good reading. It was
Interesting.
its absence was, I mean, because it was one, it's being considered as a single book, the 3 volumes of The End and the Death. There was no afterward authors afterward on volume 1 and volume 2, so it was there in volume 3. It's lengthy, and I found it very, very interesting reading, having completed the 3 books. I thought it made a very interesting reading, and it did add a perspective to it, and how he structured it, and some of the decisions he made with it, which I thought was really valuable for understanding it.
I think we'll maybe swing round to that at the end, because I think there are things there which tell a story, and maybe I'm reading into it a bit more, but potentially. I wonder if, so there's an argument of, and this is kind of more of a general thing, like, did it need to be 3 books? The nature of those books, how long the book is, and that we'll get into that at the end as well. But did maybe the events within the book, having decided to do the Dark King, having the build up in book 1, having the Dark King in book 2, and having the fight be book 3, does Sanguinius's death and the fact that Dan seemed to want to tell it in chronological order, didn't want to have to cut back in time at any point. It seemed to happen. This is happening at the same time as this, if not straight afterwards. Nothing ever seemed to cut back into the story too much. Does that necessitate Sanguinius' death being a cliffhanger on the end of a book, or not cliffhanger, but a punctuation? Does that need to be at the end of the second book because the third book is smaller, and tighter in story?
Tricky, isn't it? I guess presumably there was a decision. He's written it as a single book, and presumably the decision was made later to break it into the 3 volumes.
Well, I don't know. I would suspect that Dan realised it wasn't going to fit into 1 volume, well before getting anywhere near that, and maybe has decided.
It was structured accordingly.
The end of this point will be the teleportation onto the Vengeful Spirit, which seems like a good place to end that first book. The end of the second book being Sanguinius, and that leaving, a smaller scope for the final book, although larger kind of impact. And again, maybe we'll cycle back round to that, but I wonder if that had an effect on the nature of having 3 books, and the way they were structured within that.
I personally, I enjoyed it as an arc. I enjoyed reading it, but I think it's fair to say you and I both enjoy just being absorbed by these things.
Yes.
By these novels, by these stories. So it's almost it's a bit of a case of more is better. However,
to a point,
that's said, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
However, I did get the impression, having completed it, that it would have been an excellent 2-book series.
Yeah,
and rather than 3. Is that not what we're doing here?
Yeah. I think we'll swing around to kind of that at the end, but essentially, yes. I think I talked to you. I certainly said to Michael as well. Reading the first 2 volumes, particularly, I enjoyed them, but they're flawed. I can appreciate, in my opinion, this is all opinion at the end of the day.
I think that's a strong. But carry on. Yeah, that feels strong to me. But yeah,
I appreciate. I enjoyed the books. I think there are issues with how they've been put out as a general thing. I think there are issues with each of, particularly the first 2 volumes, but that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy them. You know, I can watch a film and enjoy a film and go, I would have made these changes. You know, and that's how I feel about it. And that's what I mean by flawed.
I would probably think of, I would have a similar feeling over book 2, not so much book 1, but I can understand people's thoughts on book 1. I think those stylistic choices kind of reinforced some of that, but I could deal with that and be fine with that. Book 2, I struggled with slightly more.
Sure, it's been really interesting to see people have real major kind of. I've seen massive differences between I enjoyed book 1 more than book 2, more than book 3, and I'm like, wow, did you? Okay, cool. And then other people are like complete the opposite, and then other people, you know, choosing different. Like, there's a huge range, and
I quite like that. I like that that's the case. I feel it's right to sort of reflect on it now that we have all 3. One has read all 3. To do so feels premature. Having just read, say, if you've just read one or 2, I think reflecting on them as a set is useful. I really enjoyed. 2 was harder. 3 I thought was the highlight of them, and given that was a nigh on impossible task, I think that's saying something.
Cool. All right, let's move on. We'll swing back on that, I'm sure, at the end.
Okay.
We'll wrap up. So we're going to pick out some major points from the stories and some kind of threads as well, and what we think. So we're going to start with the Dark King. What did you think about that whole Dark King new thing? And
I was a big fan, and I liked the way it was put across. I fully believed, I think is the right way to put it, that it was referring to Horus. And then when it became clear relatively rapidly that it wasn't going to be him, that was quite exciting. And I thought the way it was presented, particularly at the start of book 3, where there's real sense of the Eldar's perspective of it, I thought that was really cool. It added a real sense of gravitas to it and significance to it, and you realize, okay, this isn't just. I mean, that was really turning it up to 11 of what the stakes were and what could happen. To me, it was the biggest surprise. Was that true? Maybe we'll come.
I think it's the biggest
on that, but it was probably the biggest surprise.
I think it's the biggest change / new thing,
and it was quite explicit as well. That was surprising. It wasn't alluded to. There was quite clear statements made through it, and I was surprised at that in some ways. I'm going to enjoy rereading now, knowing that. I thought it was cool. I thought it added to it, and it adds an interesting perspective. What did you think?
So I was told that this book that Dan had given definitive answers, as much as they can be definitive answers, if you know what I mean. Had put stuff in here that was basically, I was told that Reddit will love it because there's bits they can pull out. The Dark King. Yeah, I thought it was going to be Horus, and I thought that was awesome. I thought the idea of Horus wanted to become this Dark King would be awesome, and it was more than alluded to with the thrones and all that, which becomes interesting when we talk about Horus and the fight and the Emperor. So I think it's cool. I think the idea is cool. There's something about it that sticks with me as not being quite fitting. Like I can see that it works within the lore, but I think I read the Goonhammer review of the book, which I agree with some, didn't agree with some. Some interesting stuff in there, but the fact that the Dark King is such a big part of this final chapter, loose chapter, is there's no reference to it before, no reference to it afterwards. It's not in the lore at all, and that shouldn't preclude new things coming in. But I mean, if it's just covered up, if it's just not mentioned by other stuff, like even chaos going forwards, Like, it feels like, well, why is it here? What does it mean for 40k? Is it just going to be quietened up and hushed, and it's just going to be something for this book? And for me personally, it it lessens it somewhat, because I'm
Lessons
thinking
what?
it lessens the impact of it a little bit, because
It lessens the impact of the Emperor. What?
of that storyline on the story, of that
Right.
individual storyline on the story. We've got this thing which kind of, it's like it bubbles along, it blows up and then disappears, and it's like, but it should be super important. And this is a problem you've got when you've already got future histories written of what's going on, and all that stuff as well. It feels, are Black Library ever going to follow up on this?
I don't. It didn't strike me like that, really, because it feels like it's very much in that moment.
But
It feels like it is quite contained to that. It's massive, and yet isn't something that's done in full visibility of a cast of thousands. It felt like it was could have been, and appears to be, quite localized. And actually, the people who would have understood the enormity of what that was pretty limited. It's the impression I
pretty
got.
important. I mean, Araman picked up on it, like,
And to be fair, so did the
from
Eldar.
miles away. Like,
Yeah, so did the
so
Eldar.
the Eldar did, like, and the Emperor's still on the throne, like, and there's no threat in 40k at the moment of the Dark King, but that should always be a threat. Like, at any point, the Emperor could delve into that power. So I'm in a weird place with it.
Yeah, it's
As
an
much as
interesting
anything
perspective.
else.
Yeah.
And it kind of, I don't. This is just me. It sort of smacked a little bit of, oh, I need something new. Let's throw this in. Which, and I'm not saying that's easy to do. You've got to do stuff within this story that's new, so it becomes hard. I'm being ultra critical of it at the end of the day. So, and I'm not 100% sold either way. I sort of had no problem if Horus was the Dark King and it was pulled back a little bit. But I know there's an element of throwing red herrings in to keep the story, particularly because you know the ending.
Yes, and the fact that there had to be a sort of twist in that, but I wasn't expecting a twist in that for moving away from Horus. And I thought the representation of Horus having to hide himself entirely within that, because I was finding the representation of Horus, and I've spoken about this before, frustrating. Thinking this guy doesn't seem like a credible threat, and actually suddenly realizing, oh, this is a deliberate, and it was stated it was a deliberate move for him to appear like he was almost suffering a dementia-like state to hide his true self and his true meaning, to make himself appear vulnerable, and then reveals the power of what was going on. I thought that was brilliant, and then to potentially that to have been extended into what the significance was of the Dark King, it was entirely believable for me, which is why I was kind of entirely behind it and didn't suspect it to be something else. Didn't expect. I'm sure there were people who saw it coming, but I was not one of them.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, in the moment of reading it, I didn't have much of a problem with the Dark King, or as much of a problem. It was looking back on it and that kind of feeling. So, but again, like, it's it's easy to come across here as being ultra critical when I'm kind of not. I'm picking holes, like, in a book I thoroughly enjoyed and thought was very good. But going forwards, I just wonder with the Dark King. It's an interesting one, and maybe my view on it will change over time. I've read it and I've listened back to it. I haven't listened back to that bit because I only listened back to most of book 1 and book 3 because of time. But hey, we'll leave the Dark King there.
It will be interesting to see if it becomes something that is referred to as we move forward in
I've kind of
in 40k.
there might be a little bit of projection on my part as well, because I was kind of heard that there are parts of this book that might not be pushed forwards, that might not fit fully within how Black Library want to move forwards, and maybe I'm projecting that it's that as well. So there could be that. Anyway, let's move on. The big fight. Most of what we're going to talk about, I think, is from books 2 and 3 and later, because book 1 is all set up pretty much, isn't it? A lot of book 2 is set up as well. But the big thing about this whole thing we wanted to see, was the big fight, Horus versus the Emperor. I actually think it was handled stupendously.
When you think what a challenge that is,
yeah,
I mean, how do you begin to go about it, let alone actually deliver it? I agree with you. I thought it managed to deliver on something that was near impossible to do, and I thought nailed that.
There are things that I would have changed a little bit, but in general, over the course of such a long fight, with what goes on around it, the way they do it, starting with, it's all Horace's point of view, which means, and I was reading it thinking, people are going to be quoting that line, people are going to be quoting that line when they get into discussions about the nature of chaos and blah blah blah, and the Emperor, they're going to be quoting that line, and this is all Horace projecting onto the Emperor, because the Emperor just doesn't say anything. So, and even what he says is not to Horace. So right from the start, when the Emperor turns up and ignores Horace, and is
I
talking
thought
to
that
the
was one of
Chaos
the
Gods.
most resonant things almost in the whole book. That was such a cool moment of what he said, and the anticipation was so high, and then to deliver that the way he did, I thought that was brilliant,
and fits with him, supposedly cutting off this part of his soul that was that might hold him back. Was just like, Horace is dead to me. Like, I have to go in there and kill him, so he is dead to me. I can turn to these 4 gods and just, say, what have you done? What have you? And we go through that, and then you got Horace saying, "Oh yeah, when you did this, when you did this, you meant this, and when you did this, you meant this," and it's all Horace projecting. None of it is the Emperor confirming
none
anything.
of it is necessarily reliable.
No, and I think it's going to be seen as reliable. And then what's really interesting is when Horace lets that power out of him right at the end there, when actually he kind of just says, "Ah, you were right." Like, he pretty much says, "I can see why you didn't tell us about chaos." Sort of answering that question, because that's always, well, why didn't the Emperor just tell them? Well, Horace gives his version right at the end, and in the situation he's in again, so that has to be taken into context. And he's like, "Oh, I get it now. I realize how dangerous it is that we know about this. Look what happened to me. I thought I was in control." I thought that was fantastic. There's so much projection. Like, you did this on Moloch, and it's like, you did this here. But Moloch comes up, and it's always a big part of that argument. But we don't actually know what happened to the Emperor with Moloch. We don't know how that power was stolen. We know the Chaos Gods say it was stolen, and there's little bits where other people kind of feed in a little bit, but the nature of that deal or what might have happened is unknown, really.
It was interesting that he maintained that unknowable. I think because he touches on this in the outer, doesn't it? The unknowable Emperor. You cannot represent him. You cannot have something from his perspective. He has to remain something different, and that being a set in stone kind of rule to how he went about it, I thought was an interesting restriction he put upon himself, and I think I agree with it, because it makes him what he is. It was interesting that I thought that it was a repeat of how he had represented the Horus Sanguinius fight, in terms of choosing it from a Horus point of view, because that was strong for that reason.
Yeah.
And this was more so, I would say.
Yeah, it was really really well done. The only I do have some sort of like not issues, but there were like at one point I was jotted out like I've written in our notes like I could do this all day because the Emperor gets knocked down maybe one too many times for me. Pulls the steel chair and whacks Horace around the head with it. Uh, but actually, on the second listen, that wasn't as much of an issue for me. Or, on the listen back rather than the read through. But it was, it plays into that, pray you're captured by an evil guy because an evil guy will monologue. And Horace, there's a Pratchett line for people who don't know, but Horace had opportunities to finish him and had at the end like convinced himself, and the Emperor kind of fed into that and fed it again without us ever seeing the Emperor do it, played up to Horace's arrogance and made, or certainly from Horace's viewpoint, everything the Emperor did, like kind of bit at him and was like, oh yeah, you think I can't do this? I'll show you. I will put this. I will break you until you want to die. I won't let you die. Um, all that aspect of it. But we had say there's a tight balance there. Maybe one fewer. Oh, he's dead, but oh no, he's not. He's come back on me.
I would quite like to reread slash listen to that again, to see how that sits. I think I had a similar feeling, but I don't remember feeling particularly strongly about that. There were other
Sure.
parts of the big fight that I I would be mildly critical of.
Right.
That more
Okay.
so,
Go. What? Give me one of those.
it was the way the other viewpoint characters were in it. I found some of that, Litu, for example, and I know I will come to this as we go as well. The way John and Hall are
Right. Yeah. I
inserted
think
into
that's
it, Loken, there's a few of those where there's quite a lot of extra people inserted for a viewpoint, and I know they needed it. Did it need as many? I'm
I
not
don't
so
know that
sure.
they needed it, and I think it feeds into that thing that I was saying that there
Mm,
were just too many. Oh, get out of jail free cards.
mm,
But in a way, yeah, it's a hard balance to get right, and it was just maybe just tipped over. And again, I think that point will come up later as well.
mm.
I really enjoyed the nature of the fight, like the physical fight, the um, kind of utilizing planetscapes and realms to try and off put one another,
Yeah,
using the tarot as like Magic the Gathering, and
yeah. But I didn't. That I was less convinced by the tarot, the importance of the tarot, but I did like what he was doing to say that this is a fight that's taking place on multiple planes of existence,
yes,
and it had to be representative of that.
I
So
didn't
fair enough. I didn't. It didn't
I didn't
resonate with me perhaps so much, but yeah,
I
it's a
didn't
thing.
feel the tarot was an important part of the fight per se, but I felt it did help represent how, in that point of the fight, Horace thought for whether he was or not. Horace was, in a complete position of power.
Mm,
Um, it also ties in a little bit then with what was going on with the tarot to help later on, and that kind of the tarot's used a little bit here and there. But yeah, showed the nature of a how do you show a multi-dimensional fight? Like,
yeah, yeah. That is
so
yeah.
I haven't got a problem with that per se. I think I
No,
don't
that
think
was
there's
just
a
one
way
that
you can do that. Yeah,
talking about those
slightly off
parts of
note.
it that go slightly further than you might have wanted them
Sure,
to personally. That was
I
one
can
for
see
me.
that. Yeah, I can
Mm.
see that. Um, cool. Okay, the knife. Okay, you brought it up there. The people getting involved. Lee too, who doesn't really do a lot when he tries to get involved. Bless him. Um, Loken. Uh, Loken is a bit more subtle, isn't it? Because Loken is the distraction, the needle under the the pin under the skin, the antagonizer, without necessarily determining to be, but the off-putting aspect, that the stone in the bottom of the shoe, which I think worked quite well.
Yes.
I don't have a problem with Logan being there. Lee 2, yeah, cool. Doesn't really do much. Doesn't really affect too much. The custodian, limited, cool.
But then you were at 3 at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've seen them multiple times as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then John and Ol. John and I thought, and again, I think this is a little bit like trying to hide, hide the trail and some red herrings in there. John and Ol had done their big thing by ending the Dark King, and some people don't like the way that Ol managed to finish that Dark King. It was like, calm down, have a Snickers, and oh yeah, cool, cheers, Ol. And I can understand that as a criticism. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand it. And I was quite happy with that. Okay, cool. They've done a really important thing. Fine. But for them then to jump into the ship, okay, do we need them here? Okay, he's got to give the knife to the Emperor. Horace doesn't recognise there's a knife there in his arrogance. Fair enough. Maybe I can let that slide. Does Ol need to do that there? Could that have been done beforehand? Also, John then, by that time, uses Enuncia to knock Horace back, like a perpetual human, but a human manages to send Horace flying long enough that Ol can, convince the Emperor to take the knife and put it in his hands and give the Emperor time to get up and blah 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 blah. And then that's it. And I'm like, hold on. Enuncia was a big thing made of that, and John wanted to use it. The Emperor knows about it. I thought that was going to be a major part, and again, has Dan used that as a red herring previously, but also, was it worth it as a red herring? Was it worth it for that one point when John and Ol gets to be the guardsman on the ship from the story? Fine, but we've already had the other Ol, holding up the flag in Saturnine as a representation of standing in front of Horace.
Which I thought was going to be the sort of switch to say we're all expecting it to be, actually, it was this guy all along.
Which is kind of double.
Ol's going to be doing something else. And I thought, that's quite cool.
So it's kind of a double switch.
Yeah.
But do we need... My initial thought was it undermines that original scene. I'm not sure that's true now, to be honest. But I get to that point and I'm like, did John and Ol have to be there?
Funnily enough, now that it's been a couple of weeks, or whatever it is, since I completed the book, finished the book, at the time I finished it, I would have agreed with this more strongly, and would have sat ever so slightly strangely to me the way that had been introduced, particularly John. Funnily enough, less so Ol. Now I'm looking back on it, and I'm wondering if I'm looking back on it more favourably because time has done that. But I'm actually not. I don't mind it. It's almost more dramatic somehow. But their job is done. They've had a major impact. That's it. We've had the impact all that we could have ever hoped to do. Let's go home, effectively. Let's turn around and then go, actually, there's one more thing we have to do. And that one more thing ultimately ends them. Not both of them, but ends Ol.
Does it?
Actually, true. Fair point. Yeah, fair point.
Killed by him.
Yeah.
That's
assuming
another issue.
It does. Yeah. Assuming he's that he is actually done. Actually, now I look back on it, I think it's not too bad. But it's another two characters you're introducing into that throne room.
And that was going to be my point. I was going to offer up that if you haven't just read about the custodian trying to get involved. I can't remember his name. League Two trying to get involved. Loken trying to get involved. Like League Two again trying to get involved. Okay, cool. Oh, we're right there. Oh, and then Orange on the pier. Really? Had they been first or second involved, I don't think it would have hit as hard.
Agreed. Yeah.
But because it's like that, oh really? Another one. Like
Yeah.
I think there's just an element of like we didn't need that, and it didn't matter who. It was going to be the last people involved that bear the brunt of that. I still think there's an issue with John and the Annuncia. But there's an argument here. There's a discussion here, and it's one that have you ever read the Dark King? What's the Gunslinger?
Dark Tower.
Dark Tower. That's the one. Have
I
you
think I read
ever read that series?
The first one. No, I didn't read the full story.
Right. So 15 books or whatever it is of that series, and it basically, spoilers here for anyone who's going to read the Dark Tower and hasn't yet. It ends up with the Gunslinger, Roland, going into the tower and starting book one again with a very slightly different twist, attitude, and slightly more knowledge. And the afterword reminded me a little bit of this afterword, because there was the afterword in the book I read had a second edition afterward, and it was like a lot of people have like moaned that the ending wasn't good enough, but the story's about the journey, and there's an argument about journey versus destination, and how much is that destination worthy of the journey? How much is the journey by itself, or is it undermined by the destination? And I think you can have a very healthy discussion with Grammaticus, and indeed that whole, you can include Acte in there and the others, and say, was that journey worth us reading to that extent to get here? And was it worth reading in the manner it was told? That's probably the more important part. Did we have to read it within mainline series stories? And potentially yes, because it impacts heavily at the end. But I think you can have an argument there. You can have a discussion about journey, destination. Should John have got there? Enunciate. But all that stuff can be folded into that one thing, and it's a bit of a cloudy issue.
I think that's going to be a bit of, not a theme as such, but it might be something that is a thread that ties together a few of our discussion points here. Is we have a general thought, and I think we're not alone in this, that it is a very long book, this 3-volume book that we're talking about. Are there parts of that could have either been cut
or told
a different way? And you were touching on it there, which is what just reminded me of it, of a conversation you and I had, a point you put across. Are there things that could have been moved into a novella, for example, or a supporting story without diminishing? And I thought that's a really interesting.
Well, we're there now, right? And the biggest culprit, I'm going to use that word, the biggest culprit of that is Foe. And his whole story.
I thought your example of this was a really good perspective.
So Foe was introduced in a short story in, whenever it was. And then
Sons of the Emperor, I think.
Something like that. And then, a number of years ago. And then his story was effectively picked up in the Siege of Terror. Now, Foe's storyline for the Siege of Terror essentially is to get a genocidal weapon onto Titan that the Grey Knights hold in 40k, and also to become Xanathus, and therefore one of the first Inquisitors, and the Xanathite aspect of Inquisitor. And that's what Foe's storyline does, with a couple of other little bits in between, right? His effect on the Siege of Terror is essentially 0. So why are we reading about that story? Why do we have that real estate taken up within a series of books. That is as much as the story of the Sisypheum and the Selenites, and we had Fury of Magnus, potentially bigger, could have been a novella that fit into the Siege of Terror books, and we would have not Garrow. We would have not lost a thing from
in terms
the
of the
main
main
storyline.
narrative beats. Yeah, I agree. You could argue you could make an argument for we need a thread is the red herring argument to say it could be going this way. Oh no, it isn't. It's going to be
and it also sort of ties in with Vulcan as well, to be fair, because Vulcan's sitting there with decisions to be made, and it feeds into that. So I will accept that. I know, the way we talk here, sometimes we have to talk as if we're dealing in absolutes, obviously. But he does feed into Vulcan. But the story, the talk online from the Pilgrims, from John and Ol and all that, and the foe as well, was this better pay off. This better pay off because there's lots of it. There's lots of it. And then you get to the end and you're like, did it pay off? It's
again, it was one of those things I was surprised was so absolute in that, this is the thing, this is the Terminus decree, this is the piece of law that was alluded to it took quite a while to get there and coalesce into something with the Grey Knights. I think it was over a few iterations of their law and codexes, etc., that led to that, and then it was, this is that. Okay, I mean, you could say, well, that's one interpretation of it, but it appeared to be quite unambiguous, and I was slightly surprised that not only was that the particular destination for that story, but that it was fairly unambiguous that it was that, because it had that Terminus decree had almost been left ambiguous in itself, and then for it to say no, it's this thing that this guy did. But it's a really interesting thing to say. What effect did he have? Did the foe storyline have on the main beats of the Siege of Terror story? The Vulcan, his impact on meaning Vulcan had some very difficult decisions to make, is an interesting one. But it's a lot of work to make for that setup to take place.
Yeah, and maybe not even a novella. We know they're going to come back, or we know they can come back and tell more stories. So basically, I just don't think it needed to be in the main storyline. And
no,
and
it's hard to find a counter argument to that from my perspective.
Maybe there is one out there. Hit me with it. Anything on this, I want your feedback. Alongside that, I would jump into Sigismund, Ran, Abaddon, Acte, Lillian Chase. Who else was there? There were a number of others in the first books I can't remember the names of. Storylines or characters that had a lot written about them that didn't. Like Abaddon's a bit different, but how much of that linking forwards there was, how much story there was about people who, again, didn't necessarily have to be there, or the quantity of their story didn't have to be there. There are certain ones like Amit and Raldoron who feed into the Sanguinius fight and the flow of the Black Rage, and how important that is, which was handled fantastically. I thought the Black Rage was brilliant. The depiction of the Black Rage was really good.
I thought that was a good example, if I can just diverge for a second. I thought that was a very good example of what Dan describes in the afterword of, I'm going to describe this in the realistic terms, to say that this isn't the mythology of this is being there in the moment. And I thought that was quite a good example of that, because it added perspective, it added insight into that moment and to that of cause and effect that I certainly was unaware of. And having the Blood Angels being one of the vectors I had into the whole hobby, let alone the law and otherwise. It's something I've sort of followed through various either iterations or otherwise, was very familiar with what that was. It presented something. I mean, I don't remember it being portrayed as something where they were capable of attacking friend or foe, which
Well,
makes perfect sense that is what's happened. But to have it put forward in such an explicit way, I thought was a really cool thing. And as you say, it was handled brilliantly.
it's also the specific moment of Sanguinius' death. So the Black
Yeah.
Rage might not be, because we've seen the Black Rage before in the Heresy. And Sanguinius, it was like kind of attributed that Sanguinius' presence dulled it down. The Black Rage we get post Sanguinius' death might not be quite as kind of, well, actually we saw on the Demon Planet when they thought he'd died, like we saw it come out. Is it ever going to be as powerful as it is the moment he actually dies? This is peak Black Rage. So
Unleashed, if you will.
Almost levels of what it can and can't be. But that was handled really well. But there were a lot of, just seemed to be like, I mean, Foe suffers from this. He becomes, Xanathus. We've got Acte and Moriana, Lillian Chase. Characters that are pushed forwards that Dan's had. Chase is one of his, and we've seen this a number of times with their various authors that characters are pushed through. It seemed to be a big attempt to tie a lot of things up, and that's a hard thing to get right, I think. How much tying up? Because one complaint I saw was, what happens to Gilliman? What happens to here? What happens to afterwards? And it's like, and I read, I was listening to the book. After Horace dies, there's an hour and a half of audiobook. Like some of that is getting Horace onto his throne, and then I think there's like another 30 odd 40 minutes after that. Once Horace is on the throne, of tying up, of rounding off the story for this point. If you had to round off everyone's story, you'd be there forever. It'll be 10 times worse than Lord of the Rings. I don't have a problem with Lord of the Rings, by the way, but lots of people do. That it's got 5 false endings. Also, if you want to do the scouring, you have to leave space for those stories to be told within the scouring. Like the opening book of the scouring can be, Gulliman getting back to Terra and having to deal with that aftermath. But if you've already told Gulliman's story once, it's hard to then tell it again.
Not only that, but told it in a rapidly diminishing amount of space as well.
Exactly. And they wanted to know about all these different characters, and it's like, but they're not important, right? The important thing was, the Emperor's put on the throne, and we get a feel from the characters that were mentioned and shown. We get a feel of where people are, and B, where the story's going. So the Solar Fleet is now coming out because, whether the Emperor's won or the Emperor's lost, it's time to fight. Gulliman's like, right now I'm coming, like, something's happened. And other people are like, well, they're running away, like, we will pursue them. Like, but it's changed, like, have we survived? I think that was handled pretty well. And there's going to be lots of stories to be told within that as well. But there was a lot of, it felt, books 1 and 2 felt long, and
2 more so than 1 for me, but yes.
Sure. And I think that's partly because it came after 1.
Fair enough.
You know what I mean? You'd already had a long book.
I do.
And then you get more of the same. So there's an argument of, like, could we have cut down a lot of seeing what Sigismund and Ran were up to? And you've got to tell the Dark Angels fight because of the nature of the Astronomicon. But did we need... I will get into that actually a little bit, but did we need all that? The Sanguinius fight was brutal and gorgeous. Like,
it was.
The brutality of the ending was perfect, in my opinion.
But also almost the coldness of it.
Yes.
Particularly the actual death lacked a certain drama, which I thought was...
Which was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was.
It could have been very mythological or bits and pieces, but it wasn't, and it was like, oh no,
which
and
is
that this has
fine.
happened. You know, oof, yeah, it had a power for that.
And it works especially well because the 40k mythology sort of still stands in a weird way. You can still have the story told in 40k that Sanguinius cut the wound that the Emperor used to kill him. Like the mythology can stand, but knowing that the reality was much more brutal than that kind of makes it all the more kind of we will honor Sanguinius for what he did. You know, even though, like, actually the truth of it is, it didn't work out the way we think it did. I kind of like all that as well. Yeah, no, that was really cool. What else have we got? Oh, yeah, in the aftermath, because we're on that. Abaddon and Loken and Erebus. I've seen some angry people, and I
I was,
don't
I
quite
was,
get it.
I was genuinely shocked by it. And it was strange because when it happened, it felt sort of obvious once it had happened, and yet it was probably the biggest shock I had in the whole thing. And I thought it was perfect for that reason that it
Yeah,
happened. The fact that he has even more reason to hate Erebus. He continues to be a genuinely detestable bad guy. You're like, that's brilliant.
do you know it's weird that I can't hate him? Like, there was one point I actually hate him more. Well, not hate him. More for book 3 when, like, right at the start you
Yeah,
think,
I know. Yeah, I can see that.
you know,
Yeah,
like, this is the point.
yeah.
Him killing all the people he's killed doesn't really bother me too much, but yeah, it adds into that his character and his, he's a git, shall we say.
How do you think Abaddon came across?
Over the whole books, or
Yeah,
so I think
over the
he
whole book.
felt different across the 3 books.
Mm,
Um, Certainly the last one felt more like the Abaddon we know going
mm,
forwards. Interesting. I couldn't quite get on board with Erebus giving him that power, the demon power. Felt
mm,
a little bit like, would Abaddon do that? But certainly by the end of it, when he's like, no, like, I told Horace he was wrong from the start. Like, he got
mm,
this wrong. Like, we need to go and sort this out. It felt very much the Abaddon of Black Legion and Talon of Horror.
mm. Well, the first step on the Abaddon was that. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I forget that Erebus makes it all the way to the 13th Black Crusade. It's a real shame. I really would have loved someone Erebus to get, like, a knife in the back at some point that finishes him
Mm,
off. And it wouldn't ever finish him off because he's too embedded. He's the real Chaos God's,
mm.
like, golden boy. But yeah, and do you know what? I saw people going, "Oh, how could you finish off Loken like that?" And I'm like, well, at the point he's at where he wants to stay a Lunar Wolf with Horus, and he's earned the respect of Abaddon because Abaddon recognises that Loken hasn't dived into what the others have with this, mythological fight. He hasn't.
Mm.
Oh no, he's kept true to what he is as a warrior. And so he's like, cool, yeah, I'm not going to kill you just because of that. That's fine, fair enough. But what does Loken do at that point? Does he hang around with the Black Legion? Like, that's not like, his story can't end a good way. Having him, like, the whole cycle, I can see that people think that's a bit cheesy with him becoming, his death causing Samus. Um, but I felt the death was a good one for Loken.
Yeah, I agree. And cheesy. It's a bit. I feel that's a
Well,
bit harsh.
the whole cycle,
Yeah.
his
Okay.
death created Samus to do, which actually, when you think about it, Erebus claims is a really good thing for the Heresy. Um, Samus seemed to do more to help the loyalists than the traitors overall. Um,
Which is
but
kind of
Samus is
fitting.
still around, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him pop up in 40k literature moving forwards.
Mm.
But yeah, like, and also not everyone has to have a good end. Like, not all the heroes have to have the big end. Loken's finest,
Shadrach. Yes.
yeah, Loken's finest moment was staying a warrior, being like not 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 giving up any of his vows. Like
Mm,
he was, even when he was opposing Horus, he was doing it to save Horus.
mm.
He was honouring his vow to Horus, his oath, um, and that's fine. That's good. Like, he did his thing. Uh, yeah, so I have no problem with that at all whatsoever.
No, I
For
thought
Crockett,
that
I
whole.
felt people had the same problem with the White Scar who Abaddon killed in Solar War.
Mm,
They were like, "How can you do dirty?" It's like, hold on, he almost killed Abaddon. Like,
yeah, yeah,
right, there is glory in how he died. Again, not everyone can die. Not everyone
yeah,
can survive. Like, lots of people need to die. Otherwise,
and
what's the point in
some of them
having the big
in
fight?
very cool ways. Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise you end up with 40k lore that they're doing at the moment, where and Goodman struck Abaddon down, but he was teleported back to the Vengeful Spirit, and they, shot away.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like,
and
oh, no one ever
Marnius
dies
Calgar.
because
Marnius
they want,
Calgar. Oh, he was near death,
yeah,
and round we go again. Yeah.
but we need to sell toys, so we're going to keep him alive.
Mm,
Um, you know, the whole point of 30k is people die,
mm.
and you can argue not enough people died, like named people died, but it's all cool. Anything else you want to bring up specifically from the books?
Um,
For instance,
no, I think we've covered all the key points. I mean, you put together an excellent set of notes for this. I think
well,
covered all the points, and I thought, in terms of the type of reactions I had going through to it, I think it was the momentous ending that you kind of wanted it to be ending. A milestone that you wanted it to be. Um, I think those little points, we're obviously looking to be critical here. We're looking for something to
well,
sort of have a view on.
mm,
But I thought overall it was very good. But I think these points stand, really.
yeah. So yeah, again, my thing is, as a 3 book, 1 book, 1 book effort, one story in 3 books. It was enjoyable. It was good. It wasn't without its flaws, in my
Mm,
opinion. And some of them are minor, but the nature of this is to dig into those. What's
mm,
interesting is I was reading the afterword, and Dan talks about a lot about the pressure of writing a siege book, and then the added pressure of writing the final siege book to bring it all together to finish it off. And I feel I was reading it thinking I can see the pressure in the book. Uh, I think the bloat of books 1 and 2, particularly, where we get how many times did Abaddon, go through a door to find a new. He was in a different place, and it was all upside down. They were in the wrong place, and it was in the wrong place. And how many times did a Imperial Fist like look up and think, "Oh, I can't be a mile from there. That's thousands of kilometers away." And how many times did repeated scenes? Uh, it suddenly clicked in my head anyway, and this is my view of it, obviously, that when he talks about the pressure, I think the pressure made so Dan wanted to make sure this book worked.
mm,
So he was like, I need to get across the atmosphere of the early stages of the final part of the siege. So I would tell a story about these space marines who are beset, who and the world's and time stopping and all this stuff. And I will tell it. And then a few bits later, I will tell another story to reinforce that. And that's good. That's what you should do. But I felt there were first 2 books he did it one or too many times on each of those occasions, and it kind of felt, on reflection, looking back at it, it's like, well, I need to make sure the reader knows, so
mm,
I'll put in another one. And I was like, if you pulled back on 1 or 2 of those scenes every time with those stories, with I say Abaddon's crisscrossing journey to get to the bridge of the Vengeful Spirit, if he'd had 1 or 2 less scenes of that, 1 or 2 less scenes of um, the Space Wolf guy kind of getting confused and being chased by stuff, then it would have made the book tighter, and it would have flowed a bit better. And
Not an editorial
I think it's a
role.
combination of
Mm,
writer feeling that pressure and trying to make sure he lands an ending.
mm.
And that's not a negative. That's not he crumbled under the pressure. That's not what I'm saying. But
No,
there's
not
a
at all.
pressure on you, so
It
you
doesn't come across
react
like that
to
either.
it. Good.
Mm.
I'm very aware how critical these can sound when you read them.
Yeah, I'm
Listening
conscious
to
of
it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, an effect of the pressure on Dan, and then editorial not saying, okay, we can cut that. I can see what you're trying to do here. You've already achieved it. So
Mm,
pick one of those scenes and take one out, and move
mm,
it around a little bit. But we don't need quite that much.
mm,
And again, over here, you've done the same again. Like when you look at the scenes with Malkador with the really long paragraphs in the first book, like amazing. Actually,
mm,
I thought it was some of Dan's best writing.
mm,
Um, he does set the scene brilliantly. Tells the scene, but how many times did we have? I'm dying. Around me, they can't hear me. Da, 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 and like almost to the point. And it only made sense when reading that final
mm,
bit that I think that the pressure told on and came out in Dan trying to make sure it worked. And I think
mm,
a little bit of that was a little bit of the individual characters with Chase was like, I need to do this, and I need to make sure that this is wrapped up, and I need to make sure that this is done because this is the end. And I think there could have been just pull back from that. We can handle that a little bit later on. Like
mm,
that one there, that's not important. Cool.
mm,
We don't need to know the exact details. That we can fill that in. That's cool. So yeah, and I think editorially there were a few missed opportunities there to just pull that back because, as you said right at the start, I think it would have been a brilliant two-book
mm.
story. I don't know how you would handle where you break those stories because
It would be very difficult to get to that point. The editorial finesse necessary to do that, and I mean, can you imagine being the person making that call? No,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
confident that this should come out. You're like, really? You're going to make that call?
yeah,
It's a
that's fair.
massive and difficult task. But
I
had that
think
been successful, that I think would have elevated it even higher.
there were. Well, I've talked to someone who basically said beforehand it should have been. It's a three-book series, three-book arc that should have been two books,
Mm,
and I was like, okay, cool, yeah, that's an opinion. Let's see how I can see now where that is. I don't, yeah, and if your editor isn't, if you've got an editor who isn't brave enough to do that, then
mm.
um, again, I don't want to be like someone should be able to do that because
Exactly, and It's
that's what
tricky to even
editors
talk
do.
about. It's tricky to even
Yeah,
talk about because even that is well, if you're not brave, therefore it's cowardly. No, not at all. It's just degrees. It's like how far do you
yeah.
go? Put yourself in that position. That's an extremely difficult job, but it's not successful. There are degrees of success.
Exactly, and this is what I want to make sure. Like
Mm,
I enjoyed this book. I thought it was really good. I think there were a few issues, but they didn't stop me enjoying the book and think it was really good.
mm,
This is nowhere near George R. Martin and Robert Jordan, particularly, where by book five, cool editor, what editor, um, didn't have the, or it feels like that they didn't, the editors didn't have the power to stop the author. I don't think that's what's happened here at all. In fact, I've read a book by a guy who is a very good uh, games writer, does lots of background, who chose not to have an editor because he knows how to write. And boy, when you read a book like that, you realise what an editor does. Um,
mm,
and I think just a little bit more editorial oversight on this book would really have helped. Just like turn it from a 90 to a 97, out of 100.
mm,
That kind
mm,
of
mm.
that's what we're
Exactly.
talking.
Yeah,
But it's
it's how do you
but
finesse it into something really
but But at
groundbreaking
that
kind of
point, that last five, that extra 5% or whatever it is, really can make a difference.
thing.
Yeah, but it definitely, Dan talks about a long time writing it and everything that came with it. At the end of the day, I say I re-listened to part 3 again. I think I did 4.5 hours straight in the van, which for me, as someone who can sometimes get a bit distracted when listening to audiobooks, it worked extremely well.
Yes, agree.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm probably done.
It's sort of making me want to go back and listen to it all over again, just to having
And
a
there we go, right?
conversation again. That
But
says it all, doesn't it?
yeah, for all the criticism I put in, and this reinstates it, right? For all the points where we've said, I think this could have been done better. Like ultimately, we're like, cool, I'd read it again. Like
Oh
that
yeah.
tells you what we
And
think
that's
of it.
also, we are talking about this in the context of, let's take it from, I thought that was a good way of putting it. Let's take it from a 95 to a 98
Yeah.
out of 100. You're like, it's already successful. And we've made that quite clear. It's just a question of how you then take it even further, which means you end up being very pernickety, because you're getting into extremely fine margins of discussion, aren't you? But
Yeah, if this was a YouTube video, we'd have like how we would have improved. Like,
yeah.
what Abnick got wrong, and then have a
You'd have
low
some
key.
shocking thing.
Yeah, and turns out that the subject isn't that shocking at all. But
No, I
that's what you
mean,
put
actually,
up.
they qualify it, and you go, okay, this is fairly mundane. But that's kind of how that
But
works.
yeah, I think.
One thing that just occurred to me: how did you feel Valdor came across this?
Okay, okay, Valdo's an interesting one.
He is. I was just thinking about it. I was just thinking of all the characters in it. I think I was ultimately left less than satisfied
Sure.
with Valdor, but then I think Valdor's a very tricky one because I don't know what. I've got no idea what one might seek to be satisfied with. He
Yeah.
can't have too much of an impact, but
No.
equally, he's such a significant character and an interesting character that we know very little about, that
I,
you're kind of clamoring for it. But on the other hand, you can't because it would be too
he,
significant and too big a change.
so I'm just trying to think back through. Is that because there's so much
Mm,
stuff happens in these 3 books? Like he's an absolute monster. Like when he's taking on the Justair and
mm,
they're surrounded by them. There's 3 of them fighting the Justair and he could die and they pull back, but he's just like when one of the Justair is like, right, you're mine now, and it's like, you've forgotten who I am. Like
yeah,
I
you're
might
like,
die here, but
really?
I'm not going to die to you, not yet,
Mm,
and just pounds the heck out of him. And then the scene at the end when he's talking to Dawn and looking at Sanguinius and all that, and he's like, oh, Sanguinius was the one I actually liked out of you lot.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I could cope with him. Like the rest of you could get in the bin. Um, was cool, but there's a potential that Valdor is a character that Dan's writing about elsewhere. So is that one left a little bit open? I don't know. Um, yeah, Valdor takes more of a less of a forward seat, I think.
Than I was expecting,
Yeah.
perhaps. Yeah.
Who does come off interesting actually is the Sigillite because even after it's all done, even when he's dead and lingering,
Mm,
he's having an effect. And you see Sigillite magic, which again Horace, downplays the whole time. Actually, is doing its thing. I think you know what I think this book you could come back and you could do a whole kind of section like this on this podcast about Horace's um, just looking at what Horace says during the fight and during the whole time,
mm,
because he projects so much onto the Emperor.
mm,
Like, he's like, "You did this," and it's like, "Hold on, the Emperor hasn't said anything to you here. You are just throwing your frustrations and your things, and you're justifying who you are and what you are." And then it changes a bit when he sheds that power. But then again, when he knows he's about to die, he quickly grabs hold of that power again.
mm.
Is a really like you could write a thesis there on you could do it you could write your dissertation, sorry, on Horace's mental like state and how he views himself and his relationship with the Emperor quite easily. I think there's quite a lot to unravel within that, which is fantastic. And at the end, when the Emperor says, "Oh, I forgive you," like he knows everything's broken, like, but he also knows that Horus was under influence for what he did. Now he doesn't. People think forgiveness means not forgetting as well. Like, that's not what he said. It's like, I forgive you for what's happened here. Like, it's not all your fault. But that doesn't mean he wasn't just gonna put him down and make him and pay the price for what he'd done. Using the knife was interesting. That was kind of a nice turn in the end. What's interesting is how much was changed. The little bits like Sanguinius causing the wound and
the chink in the armor,
and the chink in the armor. Sorry, all that kind of little stuff was pulled out, which I didn't really have a problem with any of those little bits that were changed and missing.
Or didn't become a thing. It just was sort of omitted, if you like. I think that's fine. I didn't think it was diminished for that. I could imagine, I could understand someone having an issue with that if they were, but it would feel like it was almost a personal bugbear of theirs, and you think, well, okay, that's fine, but it's a personal thing. I don't think it objectively diminishes it.
So if I was writing a book set shortly afterwards in the Scouring, I would have an aspect of people talking about Sanguinius and what he did, and I would be starting to like lay those myths down, like having someone else say, this happened and blah 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 blah, and to maintain the story we know, like to feed into that Bill King story and all the other stories that are built up that aren't part of this. Again, I think people are going to look at this book and go, that's exactly what happened. Like, we know what happened at the end of the Heresy, and I'm looking at it going, still pretty unreliable. There's lots of details, but doesn't mean there's lots of fact. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
I think that covers all of our various thoughts that we've discussed since that's come around.
Indeed. Cool. Yeah. Like feedback, like send us emails, like comment
send us your thoughts, because we could talk about this for days. Tell us how we've badly missed out on something.
Yeah, that is super cool. Right, let me go and stop this, and we can move on to the next bit. Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of the Imperial Truth podcast. All the usual stuff in the outro here. If you want to get back in contact with us, if you want to tell us what we got wrong about the end and the death part 1, 2 and 3, if you want to give your theories, if you want to give us feedback on topics, if you want to suggest topics, if you want to ask us questions, we can build up questions for another questions episode. That can happen. We can insert them into episodes as well. That would be wonderful. Thank you all for listening. Thank you particularly if you've supported us in any way, shape or form. We really do appreciate it, whether that's bigging the show up to other people, just telling your mate, or putting it on a forum, when someone asks what podcasts are around, that kind of thing. That all helps wonderfully. If you've ever been a patron of us, if you've ever used our element links, any of those things, we really do appreciate it. How little or as much, whatever. Thank you very much. We have a big date coming up. I can't remember the exact date, but essentially this year, in a couple of months, I think it's May. It will be the 10th anniversary of this show, and I've left it a bit late. Been trying to think of ideas of what to do, and I don't have a huge amount actually, or with other stuff going on, has been pushed aside. If you've got any ideas, any requests, or anything like that for our 10th anniversary episode, then please feel free to get a hold of us. Again, Greg at theimperialtruth.com. Or, of course, on Twitter, imperial_truth, at Child of Fang, at Child of Fang on Instagram, the Facebook page. All those are also in a link tree, which I think is in the show notes now. So you can click on that and get all links to that and to Element Games as well. From there, we've got some cool stuff coming up for you. Hopefully, we can make it cool. Anyway, there's some good stuff going on. Next episode, we should have had Adepticon reveals, and fingers crossed we're going to get some good stuff there. I've no idea, to be honest, but I'm sure there'll be something for us in some way, shape, or form. And all the fun of Adepticon as well. I'll be sitting on my phone, like first thing when I wake up, when the boy wakes me up at 6 o'clock or whatever it is, seeing what's been happening that evening in over in Chicago, and wishing I was there, and looking at maybe in 2025. We have to see how money is. Might have to do something to raise a few pounds, but the plan is to get there for 2025. I'm already missing not going this year, and we're still, a month off the event itself. But hey, it's all good fun. Right, I'm going to leave it there. Get this podcast edited and out to you as soon as we can. Thanks Disney and my baby's second birthday for delaying this one. No biggie, but we're working on keeping a regular-ish schedule. So until next time, you have been listening to Imperial Truth.